Hey, good morning to Zoom land. Thanks for joining us for this Lead and Copper Roundtable. With us today, we have Jeff Pinson and Austin Dudenheffer with Missouri DNR, Jim Patton with MRWA, and we have Steve Smith coming in later with 120 Water, and also President of MRWA, Dave Waller.
And Howard.
Oh, and don't forget our Executive Director, Howard Baker. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Jim Patton. And if you hear the bells ring, that means slow up on the chat. We're going to be taking chat questions as they come in. And we do ask that everybody be very patient with us because we do have, let's see, looks like 115 with us thus far. So without any further ado, I'm going to swing things over to Jim. Let me switch my microphone. Jim, you're good.
All righty. Thank you, Andy. Good morning, everyone. Jeff, thank you and Austin for being here today. This is just going to be a question and answer session. Yes, we're going to just talk about things, the inventory. We're going to talk about the spreadsheet. This is the author of the spreadsheet. So any questions on the spreadsheet, I have him right here. So he can answer that. Any other questions on maybe the ruling or whatever? That's why we got Jeff here. So just put your questions in the chat box. Andy will field them. We'll try to get to every one of them. I think there's probably 170 some that's registered for this class. So there's a bunch of people. So we'll get started. How do we find the spreadsheet? Andy, if you'll click that over there, we'll go to. Oh, malfunction already. Uh-oh. Okay. This is our website. You can go to our website and click on resources. And right at the top there, you'll see the lead and copper. You can click on that. Next slide. That will bring up this section right here. As you scroll down, you'll see medium, small, medium. And the biggest part of you are going to be, the majority of you probably are going to be small and medium. The large is, what's the number on the large?
500,000 service lines.
Okay. So the small to medium will go up to 500,000.
Or the small one's 10,000.
10,000. Okay.
And the large is 500,000. But yeah, majority, probably over 90%. Yeah, of our systems would want to do the small.
Okay.
Small medium.
So St. Louis or some of the bigger cities like that will have to use the large, but yeah. Okay. So this is one way where you could download that spreadsheet. And if you go to the next one, and it is the DNR website. And if we scroll down on it, you may talk about this, Jeff, more than me. So.
Well, as far as the lead service line inventory, it is due, and it's like it says on this page right here, it's due to be submitted on or before October the 16th of 2024 to the department. And the only method to submit that to the department is our lead service line inventory spreadsheet. So if you can have any type of inventory that you want, you can have your own spreadsheet, you can have it on a GIS system, make it as fancy as you want or as basic as you want. But you have to transfer that information into our spreadsheet to be able to report to us. There are around 1,700 community and non-transit, non-community water systems in the state. And we couldn't have that many different spreadsheets coming in.
Right.
So we had to standardize that. And that's why we have our spreadsheet being a mandatory spreadsheet.
Right. Next slide. Now, this is just the other side, the other part of your spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. You can click on it down there and download it from your website.
And it does have Austin and I's contact information on there. So if anybody needs to, contact us, there's our phone numbers and our email addresses.
And we'll have that at the end of this slide. They'll be on there. If you would copy them down, because as you go on through this, these are the two that you need to talk to. You need that. If you got a question. Sounds like we got a question already.
We do.
Okay.
Sandy Martinez asks, I'm a wholesale purchaser from Kansas City, Missouri. Do I classify as downstream from a lead service even though I have no lead in my system?
If there is a lead service in the primary water system, then you would be considered having lead upstream from you. So any galvanized service lines in your water system would be considered galvanized requiring replacement.
Yeah. Now, if she's all PVC or PEX, then she's good. But any of the galvanized,
That's correct.
that's going to be requiring a replacement.
Right. Yeah, because there was lead upstream from
Right.
that.
And we did contact Region 7 to clarify that question because there was some confusion where people were looking at individual service line identification for the total category and inventory. And if you have one segment, say the first segment, the system owned side was lead, and then the customer side was galvanized, that would make that service line, it would be classified as a lead service line.
Right.
But then also, we did clarify, that galvanized downstream, like EPA stated,
Right.
lead and copper rule revisions would be, galvanized requiring replacement because the lead could adhere to that galvanized,
Right.
Pipe was their logic.
And like you said, she might buy water from Kansas City or St. Joe or somewhere like that, which if they do have a lead service line and they transport water 30 miles away
Or further.
or further, it's still doesn't matter how far.
Right. Yeah. There's lead upstream from that. So then it's required that.
Yeah.
And when we asked Region 7, EPA Region 7, that they said that, the rule wasn't specific enough. And since it states that any any lead upstream of a galvanized service is galvanized requiring replacement, that means that if you're wheeled water through even 3 or 4 water systems,
Yeah.
if any of those water systems have lead in it, then you're galvanized requiring replacement for your system.
So when you're doing your inventory and you're buying water from a bigger town or some place that you think, they probably got lead, you find that galvanized, you better just put it in the back of your mind that, we're going to have to replace this.
Right.
Yeah. All righty, next slide, Andrew. If you got any more questions
No more questions.
so far. This is the magic date. I'll let Austin talk about this date. This is the due date for the spreadsheet. Okay.
Yep. So according to the lead and copper rule revisions, the deadline to submit the initial lead service line inventory is October 16th, 2024. And one thing we wanted to clarify is that it doesn't have to be 100% complete as far as all the identifications being done, because, we don't want systems to mistakenly, panic and be like, oh my gosh, how am I going to identify all these service line materials before this date? This is just the initial inventory submission. If you're a small system and you were able to identify your materials, that's great. And you can submit like a completed inventory, on or before that date. That's awesome. But I know for a lot of our larger systems, this is going to be, years in the process, making progress and reporting that on a 1 to 3 year basis, depending on their monitoring schedule. So this is the initial submission of the lead service line inventory using our state approved spreadsheet.
So system that's got 10,000 connections, they come in and they do 5,000 of it. They turn in that 5,000. The other 5,000 is not completed.
Well, actually, they have to turn in 10,000, but the
10,000.
the other 5,000 in your example would be considered unknown.
Unknown. Yes.
Yeah.
And then all the unknowns, you have to do 10% a year, correct?
We don't have a percentage.
You don't?
No,
Okay.
the EPA doesn't have a percentage in the rule either.
Okay. So we need to clarify this then. So we've got it. I know we got a slide here that said it had to have 10%. Now, wherever that come from, you guys are not doing it and EPA's not doing it.
No, EPA is not doing it either.
Okay.
There could be other states, that may have put a 10%, to make sure that you are making significant progress
Okay.
when you do your next update. But right now, we don't have anything like that.
So each year after our initial, we turn it in. So each year after that, we can submit 5, 10.
Well, the system does need to show that they're making
doing something.
progress.
Mhm.
Yeah, because if they submit and there's no change at all, like you know, you can
In
see
the
like
year's
they're not.
time.
Yeah, like
right.
they do need to make progress, and it's to their benefit to identify as many as possible, because remember that EPA is treating these unknowns as possibly lead.
Possible way.
And if they have to send out notifications to customers saying it's unknown, you may have a lead service line, that's a lot of letters to mail out. And so that's one reason, you know, they're encouraging, like, the more of those unknowns you can, you know, eliminate. And there's a list of approved identification methods. It doesn't all have to be like visual inspection necessarily,
Right.
or potholing. I mean, there's different, you know, possible
Paper
methods.
maps,
If you have,
whatever.
you know, so we've encouraged them, please start with your existing records.
Mhm.
If you have, you know, tap cards, as-built records,
Mm-hmm.
and you can verify those paper digital records. We do ask for a 10% validation of paper or digital records. So they might need to do inspection on that percentage with 95% confidence, you know, interval, and, you know, to be able to, you know, assert that that record is accurate. But then that'll save you time and yeah, in the
Okay.
field to identify those, or if the customer can help, if there's some incentive maybe where the customer can look at the service line entering their basement and take a
Okay.
picture of that, send it to the system with the address, and you can confirm
Right.
what's owned on the customer side. Because systems may know what's on the system owned portion,
Right.
but a lot of
But,
systems do not know what's owned on the customer portion because they've never in the
And that's
past.
kind of what we've been talking
Track
about
that.
in classes. If you can get, now there's going to be some customers that's going to cuss you and go, nope, I'm not helping you. And we understand that.
Yeah.
And we're all going to have that.
Yeah.
But you will have some customers that's going to help. You do have some templates on your website that you can download, they can download and hand out to the customers.
Yep.
Door hangers and I think you even got a little template to
Yeah.
hand out for them.
And one thing too, we do have, sorry to
No,
interrupt,
you go ahead.
but we do have an instructional video on visual identification of the
Okay.
service line materials. That's available on our homepage of
Okay.
our lead service line webpage. Yeah, so if they want to watch that video, it'll show customers how to look at that, and a professional from the system might need to double check that.
Okay.
There was a case where a customer submitted a picture of their gas line
Oh, no.
because they didn't see. So if they can take a
And-
picture of the
And you're
service
gonna have
line
that.
coming through the wall and the shut off valve, you know, to,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
authenticate.
and that's what we've been talking about in the classes that we've been having. If you can get them to take a picture
Yes,
in most cases are worth 1,000 words, you know.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
so if you can get that picture, don't submit that picture to these guys, to DNR. You keep it in the records. You keep it in your records for that address and that system or that service.
Yeah.
But pictures are good. We got another question. Drew?
We have 3 or 4 questions.
All right.
Larry asked, we are also a wholesale buyer from St. Joe. Do we need a signed statement regarding the presence of lead in their system? Would that help?
If they were willing to provide that's okay. And you can keep that in your records too, that says, hey, we have found lead, you know, in ours. They buy their water from, is it City St. Joe?
Yeah, they're,
Missouri American Water Company, St. Joe.
They're
Yeah.
a wholesale buyer and they're buying from.
And I do know Missouri American right now, they are going through and replacing a lot of the service lines now.
Yeah, so I
Insane.
think that there probably is lead there, but if they would contact Missouri American, they would probably, you know, say verbally or in writing if they want, that we do have lead here, and then they could keep that in their files, so they know that any galvanized that they have is considered galvanized requiring replacement.
yeah. And one thing to clarify too is that lead connectors are not counted in the definition of a lead service line, because that's another common question we get. Is they'll say, oh, if there's a lead connector upstream, does that make it galvanized requiring replacement? And the answer to that is no, according to
Very good.
EPA's, you know, guidance. And in the state of Missouri, now it depends on your state. There's some states who have been extra strict and they consider the connector as a lead service line. In the state of Missouri, we're following EPA's definition. So we're not counting the connector as the service line. It has to be a segment of the actual service line.
I'm going to
That's
throw
lead.
this out there. Do you think they will? Especially after 24?
We don't know what's
Don't
going to
know
be
yet.
in the.
I hate to throw that out there like this. It'd be
But
good to know.
right, the way that the rule's written right now is connectors are separate from lead service lines, about how you have to handle those and how you have to replace those.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the reason why EPA can't say that lead, even though it's upstream of a galvanized, is a lead service line, because it no longer meets that definition. If you go out to 40 CFR 141 and the definitions, they still have the old definition in there, but they have an asterisk by it. And when you go, that means that there's an updated definition. So when you go to that new definition, it excludes lead connectors from the definition of a lead service line. So it's out there in the federal regulation that connector is not a lead service line now.
Now, there may be a find and fix provision for replacing lead connectors. They might need to coordinate with their customers, for the customer, but the system might not be obligated to pay for the cost of replacing the connector. And if the customer refuses, access, they can't, but otherwise, if they find it during planned or unplanned infrastructure, it'd be a good idea to replace the lead connectors.
When they're there.
And one thing I wanted to bring up, that Jim had that question earlier about if you get somebody that doesn't want to participate, doesn't want to be involved and all that. Just write it down in the comment section on the spreadsheet that they refuse to cooperate and remain unknown. We don't want anybody getting hurt.
Yeah,
absolutely
that's
not.
the big
There
thing.
is no reason for somebody to go out there and put their life in jeopardy because they want to find out what the service line is.
Yeah.
And and they will need permission, to access the private property, and or they can ask if the customer wants to do self-identification, but they would need prior permission. And we say there's no penalty to the customer as far as looking to know what they have. So to me, as if I was the customer, I would be like, well, I would want to know what my service line material is. There's no harm in letting the system do an inspection. The customer's not going to get a fine or penalty or anything. So it's like just looking at it is, even if they refuse replacement, at least if they know they have a lead service line, they might consider flushing and filters or something, but at least you know where you're at. And if you confirm it's non-lead, that's great. Then there's no problem.
Andy?
Oh, yeah, more questions. If I have a part of town that I know the service taps are off a PVC line, do I still need to do the 3 inspection points, or will in-house inspection work?
If there are records on the water system owned side that show that is PVC on the water system owned portion of the service line, then that's one pothole you don't have to do. So the 3 locations, you don't have to do that. But if the customer is still unknown, you would still want to, go on the customer side and do, visual verification if you don't have a record, to exclude that. And then also get access or have the customer do a self-identification where it comes through the foundation wall or the basement wall or the basement floor.
Yeah, and if there's no basement, you can't see the service line entering. I mean, they might need to dig at the base, foundation of the building a little bit to be able to expose that. But if they can see the customer owned, portion of that too, from the meter pit, if that meter's in the right of way, the system may have access without needing, written permission from the customer. Because they need access to replace meters and stuff periodically. So, they could start with that maybe first and see, what's the material on the system's half, what's the material on the customer owned half. And
if they don't use connectors.
If they don't use connectors, otherwise they might need to, dig out a little bit on each side.
Andy?
When potholing, is there a required distance from the meter pit or the house?
That's a question I get in every class that we do. And like I told you a while ago, some regions are saying different things, but straight from the horse's mouth.
Generally speaking, 3 to 5 feet on either side of the meter, if that meter is the ownership boundary. So you can see what's on the customer side and what's on the water system side. It all depends on if you got connectors. If you don't have connectors, you might even have to dig. You can just open up the meter pit and maybe you can see what the service line material is just by looking at the meter. But if you got connectors, you can't do that. You have to go out to where you can actually see the service line. So then that depends on how large the connector is. So that would depend on how far you have to go out. Anywhere between 3 to 5 feet is the normal.
Right. I do have some systems that say, they've got a 5 foot out of the meter pit to the customer side. And that's what when they put that service in, they run 5 foot out or they run 6 foot out. I would suggest to them, if you know that, go out there 6 foot.
Yeah.
Spot that hole. That way you'll see that connector, you'll see that joint, you'll know what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, you'll be able to identify the
You'll-
line
yeah.
after you see what you've put in.
Right.
You can see what the customer put in.
And I've had operators that's been in this business for a long time. And they've come and said, I put in 90% of this. I know what's in here.
Yeah.
We can take that because they actually physically put it in. They know what's there.
yeah.
Right. We
Yeah.
talked to some water systems in Jefferson County, and they said the same thing. They've
Yep.
seen every single line go in themselves.
Yep.
And they do have invoices to back it up of what the materials was that they
Yep.
used in their
Yep.
records. And if the water operator goes out there and signs a statement that says, I've seen every single one of them, I know
Yep.
exactly what's on our side. I might not know what's on the customer side, but I know what's on our
what's on
side.
our side. Yeah.
You can go ahead and sign to that. That's your attestment. It's basically an affidavit.
Same.
And if you could actually go just a little extra mile and just have that notarized even.
Right.
If something would happen where EPA wants to come and do an audit of your system to see how well you did your service line inventory and look at your records and what you have to back up those. And you pull that out and it's got a stamp on there that was notarized, that makes it a little bit more official. And that's more likely for them to just accept it immediately when they view it.
Right. Andrew,
Let's see, where am I at?
we probably got a whole list, don't we? So, we'll try to be quicker.
What if you don't purchase water, but have an emergency interconnect?
I would say if it's just an emergency interconnection that's used very rarely, you probably wouldn't have to worry about, lead being upstream for that because it's not, something that you're doing on a continual basis. It would only be for a very short amount of time. So I think it's fair to say that probably is not going to be an issue. It would just be for water systems that are purchasing on a full-time basis, from people, and not on an emergency situation.
Okay.
What about mobile home parks that have private mains or sub meters?
On a mobile home park, if they're not regulated by the Department of Natural Resources, that mobile home park does not need to do a lead service line inventory. And you are not responsible for what they have in the ground because it's privately owned. You're basically what you would do is what you have on your side of that master meter. And then as soon as you know what's on the other side of that master meter, what they have on their side, on that mobile home park side, then you write that down in your inventory this is what is on the customer owned side. This is what's on our side. And that's as far as you have to go. We do have state parks that are like that. We only have one that has to do an inventory out of all of our state parks. And the main reason for that is they are large enough to be a non-transient, non-community. All the rest of them are transient, so they don't have to comply with the lead rule anyway.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and the inventory does apply to all community water systems and non-transient, non-community water systems that serve 25 or more people 6 months out of the year or have 15 or more service connections. So even if it's privately owned, you may still be registered as a public water system. You'll have that MoID number.
Phone number. Yeah.
So just be aware of that because we've had some.
If you have
privately
that
owned-
number, you're going to probably have
Yeah,
to do this.
You are a
Yeah.
public water system.
And you will be getting a letter too. We're in the process right now of sending out a letter to all of our water systems that are required to do inventories that state that you have to do it and what the deadline is to submit that inventory to us.
Andy?
If your current supplier does not have upstream lead service lines, but a previous supplier several years prior may have had lead service lines upstream, does that mandate that galvanized service line be removed?
If it is suspected that it was, I would consider them galvanized requiring replacement at that time because you want to err on the side of caution. When we commented on the lead and copper rule revisions, the state of Missouri's opinion was that any galvanized should be galvanized requiring replacement because you can't ever guarantee that there's never been lead upstream from it.
And if you look at EPA's definition, they say if there was ever a lead service line or unknown service line, that's upstream of it, and if the lead service line currently or historically, and they say if you're not sure, you're supposed to assume that there was and assume that it's galvanized requiring replacement. So EPA basically says if uncertainty, exists, to regard it as galvanized requiring replacement. So that's, yeah,
Like I said a while ago, if you got a galvanized pipe,
pretty much.
just probably note it and you're going to have to replace
Yeah, depends on this, system.
Depends,
If they want, EPA wants some sort of evidence. If you have, some sort of evidence saying,
it. No, it's never. Yeah.
No, there's never, but if there's an unknown above it until that's another benefit of, finding out what your unknowns are. That might save you
Right.
some time.
Andy?
Wes is asking to verify the 3 inspection points are 1, system owned service line, 2, customers owned service line, and 3, premises plumbing.
Premise plumbing is not regulated by EPA or the Department of Natural Resources. When we look inside someone's residence, it's to determine what that service line material is as it comes into that
Yeah.
home.
Point of entry.
Right. So when it comes through the wall and goes to the shutoff valve, that's still the service line. The shutoff valve and after that is premise plumbing, and that's not regulated.
And isn't it like the first connector? As it comes through the wall, the first connection?
Well,
Something
basically,
like that, an elbow or,
normally they come through the wall and then they do an elbow and then immediately there's the shutoff
Yeah.
valve. And, we do have pictures on our website that shows, meter or services coming in. But as soon as it hits that shutoff valve, that's where the the service line ends. And then from that shutoff valve on is your premise plumbing. That's what's inside your home.
Right.
Yeah, now you will see on the spreadsheet, those 2 pink columns
Yeah.
that do mention the primary premise plumbing, that's optional. We color coded that pink to show it's optional. And that is for knowing your risk tiers for lead and copper. So if you're using that location as a sample site,
point.
then you do need to check with the homeowner and find out, because that could change your risk
Right,
tier. If they have copper with lead solder, whatever,
Right.
but that's the reason why. But you don't have to do that for every house. I mean, that would
Just-
just be impossible.
Just knowing if that address or that customer is on your sample site,
Yeah,
you probably ought to know what's in their house.
Yeah.
Just,
but
And the reason that we have that on the spreadsheet is when the lead and copper rule improvements come out, there's going to be a whole new tiering system. So the tier 1, 2, and 3 and F1 and F2 that we have right now will not be used any longer. So we had that on there. As long as you're out there communicating with these individuals and maybe helping them do self-identifications, if you can find out what their premise plumbing is, then you can set up your new sampling site plan that is required by the lead and copper rule. So if you fill all that stuff out, you will not have to call up people to ask them, what is your premise plumbing? So you can set up your new sampling pool. Then you can actually have that done already, and you can just look at your spreadsheet and say, these, if this is my pool of people I want to go out and see if they'll allow us to do lead and copper sampling.
yeah.
Andy?
Yep.
Would Missouri DNR EPA expect an inventory sheet from a wholesale system such as Clarence Cannon, who has 0 service connections and absolutely no lead in their treatment or distribution system? All it would state is the obvious that we do not retail.
Right. Clarence Cannon does not do lead and copper testing because they have no distribution system. It pretty much goes right to their water systems, once they, produce it, and they're considered their own entities and they have to do their own inventories. So since Clarence Cannon doesn't have a distribution system, they don't have an inventory to perform.
I think, did we have 8 wholesalers that would not have to do inventory?
There could be, I'm not exactly
I
sure. what the
believe
number
we
is.
did a query and pulled the list, and I think there's 8 of them total in the state that were wholesalers that would not have a distribution system.
Right.
Yeah, makes sense once it leaves their plant and shipped wherever, then it goes into X system.
Right, because
Yeah.
all
That's
they
where
have
it
is a water
starts.
main,
Yeah.
so there's no
Yeah.
service lines.
Yeah.
You just have water main. And in this instance, if these big wholesalers don't test for lead and copper, then you don't have to do an inventory.
Cool.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Scott has a comment and a question, and I'm reading what I'm reading. Scott's getting ready to be disappointed, I think.
Give it to us.
Our system only maintains the water mains only. That's his statement. And then his question is, our system only maintains the water mains only. The customer owns from tap to home, and we supply meters up to 3/4, and customer pays for anything larger. So will this change anything for the inventory?
Okay, this is what I think I've heard. They own the water main, and from the corporation stop on is owned by the customer.
Scott, if that's correct, please put that in the chat.
That's what it sounded like to me.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so in that instance, there is no public owned service line, water system owned service line. So basically that from the corporation stop on into the home is all owned by the customer. So you would, only need to do 2 points. Then, where it comes through the house, just to make sure that there hadn't been a repair between that would hide something.
Yep.
So, in the house and then right there off the water main.
Yep.
And that would be 2 points to say what that, that is, the material is for the customer owned. And then on the spreadsheet for the public water system owned portion, you would say that that's not applicable because we don't own that. We don't have any ownership value.
I was wrong. I thought good question, Scott.
Yeah, that is a very good question.
Yeah, but EPA did clarify, because that's why, we're assuming the average service line has split ownership, system owned, half customer owned, half joined
Right.
at the meter.
And the majority does.
But there's exceptions. It
Yeah.
could be all system owned, the service line, it could be all customer owned, but regardless, it needs to be included in the inventory if possible, unless now if it's privately owned by a customer, they can refuse access. But that, EPA says they want.
We have some systems, especially up north, their service line, the system service line goes all the way to the house, the meters in the house.
Right. In that
So-
instance, the water system owns the entire service.
The whole service line.
Yeah.
So, Andrew,
A lot of our people don't have shut-off valves at the house. That's a statement. And then the question is, so regarding the RV parks, does that mean that any privately owned lines are not our responsibilities, which you said we don't have to worry about? So does that mean that any privately owned lines, we don't have to worry about for the inventory? For the meter, the customer's house is owned
Right.
technically privately owned.
I would say a privately owned distribution system is different than, and that would be a mobile home park or apartment complex or something that is not a public water system, which is not regulated by us. That is what you don't have to worry about. But as far as the customers go, which you have a rate paying customer and they have a service line, you do have to worry about
Right.
that. And in the case of the mobile home park, like I said before, you know what you have on your side of the meter. And if you know what's on their side of the meter, that's what you put in your inventory. And you don't have to go on out to that other distribution system and the service lines that go from
or
that.
crawl around
Right.
any trailers to see what's.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And this same applies like for private wells. If you're, like my in-laws have their own private well,
Mhm.
they're responsible for their own water testing. We don't regulate that
Right.
as a state. So they're on their
Right.
own. They don't have to do an inventory for
Right.
their own private well that serves one
Yeah.
family. But if they had 25 or more people living there,
Right.
or it was split into a subdivision, they may be a public water system and then it would apply. So yeah, if it's, that's,
Andrew,
What is the criteria for galvanized column pipe in our wells?
If you have galvanized pipe, in your well, there's a chance that galvanized coating did have a little bit of lead in it. But we really don't know that.
Yeah.
We don't have very many water systems in the state of Missouri that have source water lead. So the chances of, saying that's a galvanized replacement, first off, it's not a service line.
Not a
That's
service
That's a
line.
well casing.
Yeah.
But we do have water systems in the state of Missouri that do have, source water lead, and normally that's, galena particles, which is the ore that we have in Missouri that contains lead, and then that's sent to a smelter and it's smelted at that point and becomes elemental lead. But anyway, those water systems, sometimes they'll have to have treatment, and sometimes they'll be below the action level for lead, and they don't have to install treatment to remove that. But in the case of that, galvanized being, upstream, and that may have a little bit of lead in it that would go out in your distribution system, it's probably not having any issues or anything like that, because a lot of times that's old, casing, and it's not going to, cause a real issue.
Right. And if they were already testing high lead from the well, you
Yeah, we would know
guys
about
would
it.
already know about it.
Right.
So. Andy?
To clarify, our city only owns to the meter. The line from the meter to the home is customer owned. So do we still need to verify lines on the customer side of the meter to point of entry?
Yes.
Yep.
short answer.
That's
yes.
that's what we've been saying. Yep.
Yeah, if the customer grants access, I mean,
And if they don't, that is the unknown on their side. And I mean, we can take a hydro or something and suck out the meter and try to find out what their side is.
Mhm.
But to get access on their side, that's
Right.
And I think some systems could adjust their agreement, if they have that in their contract, that they can access the meter, and you can see, that other half, that might be opportunity there.
Right.
At least they can get, maybe 1 point there, but ideally EPA does recommend 3 points of identification if possible.
if possible.
Yeah.
Get what you can get.
Yeah.
Do something, if you can
Yeah.
just get it at the meter, you get your side. If you can do the point of entry, do the point of entry. But if you can't, do what you can do.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all we can.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, you're laughing back there. We got a good one. Let's hear it.
MRWA's Mike Bertsinger brings up, in a previous question about customers owning the entire service line, it was mentioned entering not applicable into the Excel sheet. This is not an option in the Excel sheet.
And it's not.
That, what would be an acceptable response for this situation? Would other not lead be usable?
Oh, for both halves? Yeah, because the way we have our spreadsheet designed, we do show like the system owned half and the customer owned
Yeah.
half as split sides there. So that might be something, to coordinate, because we can't always, adjust it for every possible situation. But yeah, that was something that we were wondering if they could, either put other non-lead on that other half.
So
or-
the system size, see if I'm on the right side.
Yeah.
So when we're doing the spreadsheet, customer owns all of the service line.
Mhm.
We can go on our system side and say no lead.
Or they could put, if they wanted to copy and paste like not applicable, or make a note in the comments.
Over.
That say,
and then-
yeah, because if they leave it blank, it might look like that it's unknown
Right.
or unidentified, but if it's all one system owned or all one customer.
So when we look at the
Maybe note
spreadsheet here
that.
in a little bit, you'll see at the very end.
Yeah.
We could put notes, and that would be a good place for that.
Yeah, that'd be good for a comment, and if there's confusion, clarify. But maybe keep track of that, because if there is split ownership, you may have an unknown side. So, that's kind of important for the water system to know, because it might change the designation of the total category inventory. Because, if one of those halves is, not entered or unknown, it's going to label that service line as unknown until they get some sort of result.
And,
So,
and at the end, it's gonna be lead
Yeah.
if it's unknown.
Right.
So that's
And
something-
the other
yeah.
issue that has been brought up quite a bit is field services, which are like for cattle operation.
That was
Yeah.
a question.
And, a lot, sometimes that actually does water cattle, and then sometimes it's been put in, but they never did on the customer side connect
Maybe
to
a
it.
frost-free hydrant out there.
Right. So when you're filling out that spreadsheet, normally you have the address where you can put the physical address on, because that is required to be on our
Right.
spreadsheet, which it doesn't have to be on your spreadsheet, but for your lead service line inventory, but it has to be on ours.
Right.
It's required. So that's a big difference, and you having your own one that you give to the public, and the one that's sent to us is we have to have the exact address,
Right.
where you don't have to have the exact address.
has to be tied to location.
Right.
Yeah.
So for those field ones, you can put, hey, this is a field meter for cattle operations. So
Right.
you can go ahead and put that in there, since it really won't have an address or anything.
Right.
And then you can also state that it was never activated, and we know what our service line is.
Right.
But the customer never connected because, and there is none. So then you could go in the comment section. And put
Well,
that in.
and you've got the ones, and some cities, some systems have this, is they've made a tap, they've run their service line to the meter pit, and they've never put anything in that. We
Mhm.
still have to do that inventory on our side.
That's correct, because in the future it's possible.
Right.
That can be connected. Yep.
Yeah.
Andy?
Crystal had asked a question about diamond maps, but I think Howard's gonna address that in a little bit.
Okay.
Who's responsible for the customer side of the meter for replacement?
The customer.
So is a lead gooseneck connected to copper or galvanized considered a lead
Well-
service line?
Or one caveat I might mention, customers can ask their system if funding is available to help them, bear the cost, like a low interest loan or something like that. But yeah, it is ultimately the customer's responsibility for what they privately own.
Right. And we do have funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law that goes through the SRF that will replace that basically will be available for lead service line replacements. And only full lead service line replacement is applicable for that. So if you're going to go in and just say, well, the customer refused to replace their side, but we want to replace our sides, then it won't pay for that. But if you have a parcel that's already been replaced and you want to replace the other part, then the bill money
It will.
will pay for
Oh,
that
well,
too.
okay, good deal.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
but-
Oh, you're good. So is a lead gooseneck connected to copper galvanized considered lead service line?
If it's connected to copper, no, it's not. And if a lead connector is connected to galvanized or a galvanized pipe, it's not considered galvanized or requiring replacement. Personally, I think it should be. But, EPA says that galvanized or that lead connector is not considered part of the service line, and it's not a service line upstream of that galvanized. So it's not galvanized requiring replacement.
Let me ask you this, with the implementation that's coming up, do you think it would be?
There's a possibility. We don't really know, what is going to happen right now. That's not one of the rumors we've heard. We have heard
Okay.
some rumors of what's going to be in the new rule, but as far as that goes, no.
So when they do find this, it would probably pay them to note it.
Yeah, every time
But
that
he
you
didn't
find
notice.
a lead connector, you've got to write it down. The lead and copper rule revisions, that's a requirement that when you find it, you have to write it down. If you find it during, any type of infrastructure
Planned or
work,
unplanned.
whether
Yeah,
it's planned or unplanned,
Yeah.
then you're going to have to remove it. But if you're out there putting a new meter set in and you said, well, I got a lead connector right here, then you write it down. And the next time that you do planned or unplanned infrastructure work right there, that's when you have to take it out.
And the system.
Or they
is-
could replace it right then.
They could replace it
Yeah.
right then if they've got the resources and they want to do it.
And system is not required to bear the cost of replacing a lead connector that's owned by the customer. So, they might check with the, customer, but yeah, as long as the customer doesn't refuse, it's great to get those lead connectors
And always
replaced.
note that down
Yeah.
on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Andy?
You guys are gonna get quicker. Ryan says, we're in the same deal where we own up to the meter and the customer owns afterward. Does that mean we are responsible for replacing their line from the meter inside the house?
No. It's the if it's a lead service, that's the only thing that would need to be replaced.
Replace it.
Anything else, except for galvanized that has been downstream of the
Downstream.
lead service, or, they would be required to be replaced. But the water system is not responsible at this time to pay for the customer's own portion of a service line.
They just have to notify them.
Yep.
Now, the lead and copper rule revisions does, recommend the system should offer to do complete full replacement, if they're doing their half anyway, to coordinate, because there's no sense doing half.
If they have to replace
If-
their side,
If you
Right.
do need,
Right.
if they do have to replace their side
Just-
too,
replace the whole thing if they can at one time.
yeah,
Because that's the best way to do it, really, because you don't have two disturbances.
yeah, don't dig up the yard twice.
But if you know what your side is, but you have to replace their side, I shouldn't have said that. If their sides need to be replaced, you don't have to do it.
If they refuse, they can.
Right.
And the water system is not responsible
Not
to pay for customer-owned lead service line.
And any of the premise plumbing, the private indoor plumbing, that's entirely up to the customer. We don't regulate any replacement of that. People are getting confused.
You stop at the wall.
But, yeah,
Point
stop
of
it.
entry.
Yeah, that's the customer, and they can use flushing and filters, if they don't want to replumb their house, but that's entirely private
Up
owners.
to them.
Yeah, it's up to them.
Andy,
Okay, everything in our system is either PVC or PEX. We
good.
have no idea what the customers have and have quite a few people who will not allow us to access their lines, and all of our meters are buried and lines are not visible. So if I'm understanding correctly, we would have to mark those as unknown, which is basically saying they're considered lead, required being treated as a lead service line. Are we responsible for replacing that, or is that on the customer?
Not required to replace it, but they are required to annually tell them that it could be lead and
Notify.
notify them. So that has to be done, on an annual basis. But the first thing that I would try is to show them some of the information we have on our website so they can do a self-identification at their house. And that may get them interested enough to do it. And then if they can't do it properly, they may ask for help at that point and they will allow you to come in.
Yeah.
So there are instances where you can get your customers involved and it may drop their guard and realize that this isn't something bad and it's something good and it's something that needs to be done, and they will help us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of communicating and education with customers is important.
I've had some municipalities that's already told me that they're actually gonna have not an open house, but a community get together, whatever you want to call it.
Outreach.
Kind of an outreach at City Hall or at their office, and just have a night where they're just gonna sit and
Yeah.
tell them what this is, tell them they have to do it, and try to get the customers informed that way. So
Yeah.
and that's an idea.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Andy,
Okay. Next question is, our system has been in service for over 50 years and it has always been all PVC pipe. So do we still have to verify the service line into the house?
Yes.
Next question, what about sections of ductile iron pipe in our main lines, river crossings, railroads, etc.? 99.9% of our mains are PVC. Can we report our mains as PVC?
Well, water mains aren't part of this.
Yeah.
It's a lead service line inventory, so it only goes to service lines. One of the reasons that, I know that when you have ductile iron pipe and you may have, your lead pressure fittings, that are set on. And the reason that those aren't regulated, because you do have lead joints in there, is very rarely do they come into contact with water. And in a water main, water's normally moving all the time and it doesn't set against that lead, so it has no chance to leak.
and that was one question I did receive one time was their cast iron with lead joint. Is they gonna have to replace that? No. That's
And we do have like the water main material as one column on the
yep.
spreadsheet, but primarily this is called a service line inventory spreadsheet. It's not a premise plumbing inventory. It's not a water main inventory. So service lines are really, EPA identifies as the highest risk of stagnation and lead accumulation.
so on the service the spreadsheet. With that said, fill out the information that I mean, if you know the mains PVC, fill it out. If you know it's cast iron, fill it out.
Yeah.
It's not gonna ding you on this. This is service line only.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
And that information, it may be very useful if you're going
Later
through it
on.
anyway.
Yeah.
Later on, you have that information that's, great. And that's what, a lot of webinars and things I've heard, they've said, look at this is not just a lead, and copper thing. This can benefit you in multiple ways. Try to incorporate your
was.
regular
That's right.
maintenance of when your meters need to be replaced, do your, check of each side when you're doing that. So try to combine it and streamline things as much as you can, so you don't have to revisit sites and make it easy as possible.
Okay,
Yeah.
So, sorry,
that's okay.
what is a good number to use for location ID? I've been using meter numbers. Can we talk about that during the Diamond Maps part?
We can talk about it, but we're gonna hit it here real quick.
It's up to the water system, whatever that.
If they
I
use a
didn't-
meter number,
Mhm.
that meter number can be changed. That meter can be changed.
Then you have to
You
update it.
have to update this spreadsheet
Yep.
if you use the meter number.
Right. Correct.
Yeah. Latitude,
So-
longitude.
Can I add to the question?
Yes,
Because my understanding is you have to update your spreadsheet. So once your spreadsheet is submitted to the department, you have to contact the department every time that changes, correct, to have that updated? Or
The
updated?
updates are
Resend.
required triennially if you're on
Okay.
a triennial lead and copper schedule. So
3 years.
actually what this means, you may take this to mean that once you do it and you turned it in, you got 3 years before you have to do it. That's not the
No.
case.
It's a living document.
What happens is you turn it in 2024 and you sample in 2024, then you have 3 years to send in your next update to the department. But if you don't sample in 2024 and you turn in your spreadsheet in 2024 and you sample in 2025, you have to do an update in 2025. So you have to do it the very next year. But if you do it in 2026, then you get a 2-year reprieve and then so on down the line.
so the yearly, the unknowns on the spreadsheet. When we do that, we want to do that yearly though,
You
correct?
want to do it yearly on your spreadsheet because
Yes.
that has to be made available to the public. Water
Right.
systems that are 50,000 and under have to make that inventory available by request. So doing that lets the public know that you're making progress on finding out what's going on.
Right.
If you're 50,001 and over,
Yeah.
then you have to put your inventory on the web, and that way they can track it and see that you are making progress.
Right.
So that's why you have to update your own
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah. The spreadsheet yearly.
And you don't necessarily have to include the residential addresses on that publicly available, version. EPA, encouraged it, but that's a suggestion. And we're not sure, there could be some liability issues if people don't want that,
Their address.
Right.
their address out there. So just be aware of that.
Yeah. Andy?
Okay, Wayne with MRWA and Roger have a question that's kind of similar and they're next to each other, so I'm gonna pose this. What if a customer refuses to replace their line, but also what will the ramifications be to the system's lead and copper sampling testing if a customer refuses to remove a lead service line?
Right now, there shouldn't be any ramifications to your lead and copper testing if you have people that refuse. There shouldn't be any at all.
Yeah.
And if they refuse, then they refuse. You just have to, keep them down there as an unknown. And that's the way that's handled.
Perfect.
Until the
Okay.
property's sold, no. Somebody
Well,
else.
we're kind of thinking that if the new lead and copper, that's one of the rumors, if the new lead and copper rule improvements come out,
Yeah.
that they're going to have something in there that basically says they want the lead out, within the next 10 years, because that's what the president said they want to do. But forcing somebody to remove their private property when they don't want to, especially if there's an underwater system that has corrosion control treatment and it works really good,
Yeah.
and they've tested their house and they have a no detector, they just have a little bit of lead detected, and they don't want to do it, they don't have to underneath this rule. You can refuse it.
Mhm.
So what we're thinking is if they want to have something in there that says you have to do that and to do it legally, there'll probably be a requirement that when the house changes ownership, that's when you would have to address that lead service line at that point. And it would be some type of issue between the buyer and the seller.
Right.
Who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Real estate company or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, and I spoke with a private individual that knew they had a confirmed lead service line and they weren't really that concerned. They understood the water treatment, they'd worked in utility, and he said, I know it's calcified. He had some testing done at the tap and there was no high lead levels of lead getting into the water because it was, if they feed orthophosphate or have lime softening or there's calcium carbonate coating that pipe, just because there's a lead service line infrastructure doesn't necessarily mean that lead is leaching,
Yeah, high
into the
level.
water and
Yeah.
depending on the water characteristics. And that's why they test at the tap, because that's the final exit point.
Yep.
So if there was any issues with lead getting dissolved in from the plumbing or source water treatment, something like that, it would be revealed,
Andrew?
at the tap.
We are 54 minutes in, so I'm gonna leave this question. I don't know, this may have been asked earlier. If it has, we'll skip to the next question. Can you clarify the 3 standard inspection points, specifically where along the service line from the water main to shut off valve are those 3 points?
The 3 points would be a location on the water system side
Yep.
of the meter, if the meter is the ownership boundary, and then on the customer owned side of that ownership boundary, if it's the meter, and then where it comes into the home.
Point of entry.
And those are the 3 points that EPA suggests that are checked.
Yeah, and be aware that the definition of where that boundary of ownership changes, it could be the meter, it could be the curb stop,
Yep.
it could be the property boundary.
Yep.
It varies by system.
Yep.
So
Right.
you might need to check, on your specific system and see where that's defined, because it
Right.
changes. We can't give you one standard. This
That's
is-
one of the very first things that you want to do when you start your lead service line inventory is find out where your ownership boundaries are for the service lines. That's the first thing you want to
Yep.
check.
Andy?
Next question. So any lines that we cannot verify and mark as unknown, we have to come back after 2024 and still check those lines.
You have to continue to try to get that customer to do an identification on their line if they refuse.
Update that inventory.
And they may just be unknown because you didn't have time to get to those
Right.
yet. So, that's one thing too. So they might find additional records and stuff to help verify those where you might not have to go on site and inspect or, there's options there. But yeah, you're supposed to list the toll number service lines in your system, and the ones you can't get to in time before that initial submission, you would label as unknown.
And if we do get some spreadsheets in that everything is unknown or the vast majority are unknown, we're probably going to have an issue with that. You know, it shows that you guys didn't make any effort into doing it over this next year and a half. Or if you've already started it, you know, last year, you know, because we were talking about this for the last 2 years. So people could have started this 2 years ago and they still got a year and a half.
And there's been that's done a good job on this. I've been to systems. They've got a good head start on this. Some of them's close to being done, but your bigger systems have taken the initiative and they've got a pretty good handle on it.
And funding that's available now, I mean, it's to your benefit to get, you know, started on those, because if you have the money, you have, you know, the resources to, you know, try to get those identified. And I know there's some small systems, they want to get their inventory completed by the first submission, which is wonderful. Then you got it, you know, done, and you don't have to worry about mailing out, you know, notifications to customers.
And the other thing is that bipartisan infrastructure law money, it can be used for lead service line inventories too, not just replacements, but that money can be used for doing an inventory as well. And the main reason for that is you got to know where the lead is so you can apply for the money to remove it. You know, so the first step is to inventory it, to find out where it is. The second step is to know where it is and then apply for money to get it replaced.
Andy?
Real quick to our participants, if you're not asking a question, please refrain from putting stuff in the chat box. It's hard for me to keep up with these. Since this related to lead and copper rule revisions, at some point, will the EPA likely enact more stringent oversight related to copper services?
As far as copper services go, any of the rumors that we've had for the lead and copper rule improvements haven't changed the copper rule. The copper rule didn't change for the lead and copper rule revisions either. So I think we'll still be working under the original lead and copper rule for copper related issues. But there has been some scientific data that says that the corrosivity of water is different between lead and copper. And that reason was why they wanted to have two different tier levels, one for just lead and one for copper, and two different sampling events. But since that was talked about well before the lead and copper rule revisions came out, I don't think that that's going to show up in the lead and copper rule improvements. I think they've decided that we're still going to keep it together as one test.
Okay, next question. Could we sample for lead in the water and an address to verify their service line rather than digging? We have no equipment, so we will have to pay a contractor to dig up all lines to verify.
That can be allowed. Part of some of the investigation methods that are out there are water testing, and there's flush samples, sequential sampling,
predictive modeling.
Yeah. So the way
it's all going to cost.
Right. And the way that would work is if you have water that is not particularly hard and you don't have a water system that provides water that is from a corrosion control treatment device. So there's no orthophosphate, or they're not using calcium carbonate stabilization, which that's the main corrosion control treatment in Missouri is calcium carbonate stabilization. You may be able to identify lead service, but if there's corrosion control treatment going on, or you have extremely hard water, the line's got a coating in it and it's not going to leach enough lead to make a whole lot of difference. One of the things that EPA really is looking at is a flush sample, which you can only take one sample, and that is from water that you know has been standing stagnant in that lead service line or that service line, just to see if it's lead or not. And whatever result comes out says it's lead or not. But they've also said that if that flush sample has its drawbacks, and part of that is if you have really good corrosion control treatment or, you know, hard water, you're not going to be able to use that method.
And same with sequential sampling, because, you know, if some residual lead like is leaching into that water, you might see a curve indicating the presence of a lead service line. But if that pipe's coated with calcium orthophosphate mineral scale and nothing's leaching, it's going to mask the presence. So then, and EPA did point out that different identification methods have different accuracies. So just, you know, be aware, you know, that could be a drawback.
And all that's going to give you is it's possible to be present. You're still going to have to do.
Well, what EPA was hoping to have on that flush sampling is you can say that's an identification method, and it is or it isn't.
Yeah,
is what they're hoping that flush could be, but they're trying to do a lot more research with that.
Yeah.
And with that bipartisan infrastructure law money, they've gotten a lot to do research. So EPA right now is doing a lot of research to find out what methods work, what methods don't, what new technologies are out there that can possibly help out. And they are looking for water systems out there to participate in some of their studies. So they're getting real world data and it's not a pipe loop in the laboratory.
Right.
And we did mention predictive modeling, and we do not consider that formally an ID method in the state of Missouri. It can be useful for a targeted search of your lead service lines and help you, spend your allocated funding more wisely. But as far as, indicating the presence or absence, they might, when they check it, find it, it does or it doesn't. So that's, there again.
Andrew?
Limitation.
All of our services are tapped with either a brass saddle or direct tap. What would we enter for a connector?
Well, in those instances right there, that's neither one of those is a connector. You got the corp stop coming right out of that, or you've got the brass saddle with the corp stop on it. And whatever is the material from there over to the meter could be a connector, or it could be your own portion of lead service line. Normally those connectors are in there so you can connect the water lane, basically from the water main to the service, and it'll stretch a little, give a little, so you'll be able to do that, and you don't have to have that exact measurement from one point to another. But I know there's water systems out there that don't use connectors. So in an instance where you don't use a connector, right from that corp stop on, that's service line.
That's your service.
And if you do have a connector, then once that connector ends, then that's the service line from there on.
Next question. If you had cast iron main lines with lead joints, does that mean galvanized service lines had lead upstream?
No.
Next question. When it comes for the required
We like those
sampling
places.
Yeah.
at schools, when it comes time for the required sampling at schools and daycare facilities, has it been determined yet where the samples are sent?
Okay, there's two different things going on right now as far as schools. There is the federal rule, which will be changed by the lead and copper rule revision. So we'll know a lot more about testing at schools then.
Yeah.
And then there's also the state requirement that just passed. It's a state law that requires schools to test inside their premises for lead.
Right.
And normally schools aren't fed by a lead service line. A school can't be fed by a 2-inch line. Normally they require a lot more water than that. So they have a larger main. Lead services normally aren't over 2. It's very rare if there's a lead service that's over 2 inches in diameter. So with this lead testing for schools, the schools are responsible for the state law. The schools are responsible for doing that on their own. That lead testing program is not administered by DNR. It's by the Department of Health and Senior Services. And they are in the process of hiring people and also getting a website up to help schools. And I know some schools are kind of jumping the gun on that right now, but schools right now should be just doing an inventory of their taps inside, not water lines or anything, just their taps, of how many locations kids have to drink out of, because if a kid can drink out of it, it has to be tested.
Right.
So that's what their inventory is for. It's not anything to do with our inventory.
And I think Steve with 120 Water is going to talk about the school too, because they can help schools out on that. So, but schools are their own deal.
For the state law, it's their own deal. And what we're hoping is when we see the lead and copper rule improvements come out, that our state law that's been enacted is as strict or stricter than what that federal law is, because then it lets you guys off the hook for having to test at these schools, because we've already got data that can be accepted for that.
Yeah.
Andrew?
That is it for right now for questions.
Wow. We went through that quick. Let's pull up, unless you want to, we'll do some slides, but let's pull up the spreadsheet and let you go over the spreadsheet a little bit if you want to.
Okay.
And if there's any questions on the spreadsheet, now's the time to ask them.
Yep.
The creator is right here. And I'm going to.
I'm gonna switch over to you.
You need water also?
Okay.
There's a couple right there. Get a drink or just make yourself at home, guys.
Okay.
That's weird.
I don't have it over here. Okay. So I'll stop sharing. Now
More questions.
Go ahead and ask him. I gotta be a host.
Regarding connector, I was seeing your screen
Oh, is it?
on my computer and your computer is not connected to mine.
Oh, wow.
Regarding connector classification, I would like clarification on how to enter it on the spreadsheet. Leave it blank. And it's the same question as, same person asking the question that I asked it before.
There are some options on there for unknown, but some systems do prefer to leave it blank until they have data, because unknown might mean, they still need to, investigate or find out. So, yeah, I know that some were recommending, if they don't have data yet for some of those additional parameters, just to leave, that square blank and maybe come back to it later. Or if it is unknown, for connectors, I mean, they might want to focus on the service line portion first and just leave those as unknown. But if they do, are doing inspections anyway, you can confirm, if there's one present or not.
Okay, is there any funding out there to help with this? What are small towns gonna do that don't have the funds or manpower to do this?
Like we said, there's bipartisan infrastructure law money that is available through our SRF program. And you can access the SRF website on the department webpage. And when you get out there and do that, there's not a special section for that, but they are accepting SRF applications for that BIL money. And that does include lead service line replacements and lead service line inventory activities.
Yeah, when Joan was here a week or so ago, that was one of the questions was asked, and yeah, she said it is available.
You said that, can you touch on the service sampling at daycare facilities?
On the daycare's kind of like school.
Right. On the lead and copper rule revisions, schools and daycares, the schools were required to submit 5 samples and daycares were required to submit 3 samples. But we are, since that rule has been shelved, the only thing that they want the lead and copper rule revisions to be complied with is the initial lead service line inventory. That means everything else that we've seen in that rule goes away and will be replaced by the lead and copper rule improvements.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's really going to be in there for schools and daycares yet, but there will definitely be something in there. But like we said, we're hoping that since this school rule that the state has comes about, and if it is a strict or stricter, we will be able to use that data and we won't have to worry about the water systems doing those testing.
Yeah, and one thing that might help out systems as well is depending on the building install dates, because originally we weren't really looking at those as an ID method. However, we did decide to include those as like the written or digital method if they can check 10% and validate that, because Missouri had the state lead ban enacted January 1st, 1989. So by law, it was illegal to install lead service line after that date. So if you have buildings that were constructed after that date, by law, there should be no lead service line. And you can refer to those records. And we do ask that they validate, do a randomized sampling of 10% of those, that have the date like after Missouri lead ban and verify that they don't have, lead service line. And we could include that within the paper digital record category. So that might save them some time.
And the lead and copper rule revisions, schools and daycares that were constructed after January 4th of 2014 are not required to test because it was absolutely illegal to do that. And so that's actually in that regulation that says they don't have to test.
Right. Next.
Okay, I'm gonna do a question and then a comment behind it. Because Mike Mertzinger is kind of savvy with this from MRWA as well. Brad had said, we simply do not use connectors. What is entered? And then Mike says, I think what Brad is asking is verification on them using saddles and corps with no connectors. How do they document that in the connector or gooseneck material column in the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Everybody's looking at you.
I mean, as far as whether there's a lead connector, the answer would be no. I would say, in that case.
And then Chris goes a step further and says, can you please define what a connector is again?
Yeah.
Okay. A connector is what connects the service line to the water main, or it connects the meter to the service line. So it can be, like 4 different places actually, or 3, So, a connector can connect to the meter on both sides, and that connector can also connect to the water main. So those are like the 3, main places that there's connectors. And we do have some really good pictures of that. Austin has some good pictures.
Do you
on
have
that.
some on there?
Yeah, if you want to jump to my,
Let's pull his up real
Take
quick.
What slide?
Okay,
okay.
we gotta get a drink anyway.
Well, one of the things I want to let all the water systems know is, we're here for you guys, and we want to make this as easy as possible for you. And that's why we came up with this spreadsheet, make it easier for both you and for us. And any kind of questions that you have, we're willing to answer them anytime. And we just want to, it's basically going to take you, your customers, and us, and to a smaller extent, EPA, to get this taken care of and get this accomplished.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Or sorry, just to jump in there, one thing that might be helpful too with the spreadsheet, and one of the great things I think is that we have embedded formulas, so you can calculate the risk tiers when you enter the data. And that's nice, but if some of the systems I talked to had really old computers, might be running slow, one option that might be offered, we can provide maybe a custom password if they request a specific spreadsheet from us.
And that's calling you.
Yeah, you might need to contact me, and then to delete maybe some of those yellow, because the yellow columns are the auto-calculated ones that have embedded formulas. It's possible for a really large system, if they have entering tons of data and their computer's running slow, they might want to just delete the yellow columns, that X to column AK, I believe it is, and then they can trim the spreadsheet at the bottom as well. Like if they know, because we don't know how many service lines are in your system. So that's why the large one goes down to 500,000 rows. Each row represents a single service line. But if you have, fewer than that, you can, jump down to that cell and, highlight that row across and just delete it and remove that formatting. So that will save you space, and you still have all the drop-down menus, all the areas to enter the data that you need to know. Then the final version to send to us, you can copy and paste that onto the new spreadsheet. Each column, I use that Control-Shift down arrow and keep tapping the down arrow. It'll highlight all the way down for you. You can transfer that data onto one that has embedded formulas for the final submission to the state. But that might help it run faster if you have extremely large spreadsheet, if that data is slow.
Or an older computer.
Or an older
Or-
computer that's struggling.
All right, where do we need to go here, Austin? Let's see.
Is it past this?
Keep going down. Okay, so here's the
Yeah,
picture.
if they can see this one, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
here's
You're
a
right now.
great example. Now this shows a service line and a connector. So you can see that curly cued pigtail connector connected to that water main. And that would be your connector. And then you see the curb stop labeled there. After the curb stop, there's an arrow that points, that's the actual confirmed lead service line. And if you see that wiped lead joint that looks like a snake swallowed something, that's a clear indicator that it's lead, because lead is soft, you can't thread it. If you see exposed threads, it's typically galvanized. If it's exposed threads and magnetic. But there's a clear example of a lead connector and the lead service line.
I'm going to say the majority. Now, some of the old ones are going to be like this, but the majority is you've got a tap saddle, you got a corp stop, you've got either PEX or PVC
Right.
copper coming out of that corp stop to your meter.
Right. And this
You're not-
picture that everybody is looking at, this is Missouri American Water Company's at St. Louis, St. Charles Water System. And
Yeah.
they're doing lead service line replacements and investigations up here.
Yeah.
And that's where we got this picture.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting us come up and do that. And we want to share credit with them.
Well,
for
if it's
that.
the St. Charles or Kansas City, guys, if you got galvanized lines, you're good.
And you can tell how old this is,
Yeah.
like Jim was saying, because you can see the corp stop right there.
Yeah.
And it's a tap. There's no saddle or anything else
Yeah.
like that. But when they go in and they do the replacement, that's when they put the brass saddle with the new corp stop in, and they put the whole new copper service in after that.
Now, if you jump down to the next image, now this one, here's a good question. Is this a lead service line or is it not? So you can see the gooseneck connector
Yeah.
there, but then it stops, in the mud. So that's kind of a question.
Where does it go from there?
Yeah, where does it go from there? So the system, they may need to dig a little bit more to see, does that continue? Is that a,
We know it's lead coming out of the main,
yeah,
but
because
what's the other side? Is it going straight to the meter? Is it going? Yeah.
yeah, or is it copper? I mean, it could connect to a
Could
piece of
change.
copper.
Right.
You don't know. So that's one where they might have to, dig a little further.
And in this instance here, we've cropped the picture, so we know a little bit more about what this is than what we're showing in here. And in the upper left-hand corner here, you can see bricks. Well, that's supporting the curb stop for your T handle. You can shut off the water service right there. So we know that that's a gooseneck because it's going right to the curbs, that curb stop. But then on the other side, what do you got?
Yep.
Okay, so
Questions?
Robert asks, and I don't know about context. Robert asks, so is it 1990 or 2014 for digital confirmation?
1990. Well, that'd be the 89 when the band
Oh, I
went
think
into
they're talking
effect, but
about
2014 is when the brass was non-lead.
Right. And
So,
let's start about that. 1989, that's when they had the first lead ban that came out, and lead was still allowed to be in pipes, fittings, and fixtures up to 8%. And then in January 4th of 2014, that's when the lead standard changed, and it was a compliant state for that. And that brought for pipes, fitting, fixtures, that down to 0.25% as a weighted average on all wetted surfaces. So that's why anything constructed after 2014 isn't going to be lead, because that has that real low standard.
yeah, if you put it in after 14, you're in good shape.
And that's 8% standard. That was considered lead free back then. And that's for us, you can't retroactively go back and say that is no longer lead free. That's still considered lead free because it met the definition in the law at the time.
Good.
Okay, so next question. On the spreadsheet, it's a spreadsheet question. Since there is no connector, will other non-lead work as the answer?
Well, I mean, they still need to find out what the material is. I mean, if there's no, are they talking about ones after at 1989 date? Because I think it's kind of begging the question of, you still need to figure out or find, there has to be some paper record, digital record, or verification method what the service line material is.
These two questions don't touch. It's a separate question.
Separate.
Sorry.
Yeah, a separate question there. But like we specified earlier, the connector alone, even if it's a lead connector regarding like galvanized or a service line, they're defining the service line and the connectors, separately. So I don't think it would change the service lines category and inventory. It does not change, even if there is a lead connector. We need, depends if there's a segment of the service line that is lead, even if it was a repair, but you're not able to dig up the entire service line to identify it, so EPA, that's why they recommend 3 points of identification for visual, like inspection or potholing. Next question.
We're caught up. Wow. Well, you want to do the spreadsheet, or you got something else? Bids were on here. We could do it right now if you want.
We could.
Anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, we could go down to the spreadsheet slides because that'd probably benefit systems. There's some examples. Hydrovac. Oh yeah, there's how to get to information, but you all have that linked on your website. Yeah.
Tell me when to stop.
Let's see.
Go forward.
So here's an example of EPA's guidance for classifying the total service line category inventory, and this is kind of assuming split ownership and so the nice thing with our embedded formulas is it does this for you, so you don't have to compare each of those options. You just enter what the material is on each side. So you can go down.
We're asking about we got more questions.
Okay.
The connectors are throwing us a curveball.
Okay.
Because it's a lot of gray, I believe. And Brad's asking if we can show a copy of the spreadsheet with the options for connector and gooseneck. And then Wes is saying regarding Jason's question earlier, would the saddle be considered the connector?
No, not the
Not
saddle.
no.
That's not a connector.
Okay, and then under the connector or gooseneck column, will other non-lead work for an answer if there's no gooseneck connector?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would because it fills that blank and allows the embedded formulas to do their auto calculation.
Yeah.
Next question, or should we proceed down to the?
Kind of fun questions.
Yeah, okay. Proceed to, some pictures of spreadsheet. There's the definition of galvanized requiring replacement. Out of the rule, if people need to screenshot that or want to take a, look at how exactly it's stated. And we can go on to the, spreadsheet.
Sorry. Wes, did Michael answer your question? Thank you.
Yeah, this kind of, I created a diagram just to kind of show, a definition of downstream in the system, because there wasn't really, a good diagram or picture graph that I've seen, it really demonstrated that to show that, lead could coat that galvanized. So here would be an example of where that house is located. That would be considered a lead service line, because even if half of it is confirmed lead and the other half is galvanized, the total category, would label it as a lead service line. And then the ones downstream of that, but notice the ones that have like the pigtail connector, the gooseneck, or no connector at all, the galvanized upstream would not. So I wanted to create a visual diagram just to help systems understand. That helps me at least to see the picture sometimes. And can go on to the next one. And here's the EPA where they were defining, unknown possibly lead. It's sort of assumed lead. It's kind of guilty until proven innocent in EPA's eyes, and a historical lead service line. So just because that lead service line is removed, those galvanized downstream could still have a lead coating, still be potentially leaching lead and causing problems. So that's why, EPA is saying if it's unknown or historically lead, to assume galvanized requiring replacement. Next slide. So this shows the main data tabs on our lead service line inventory spreadsheet. And I would caution systems, do not use EPA's template because there has been some confusion when EPA released their guidance on August 4th that some systems saw the spreadsheet EPA released. That was a template, and EPA expressly states on that this is not for reporting purposes to the state, because the state needs to approve, what they'll accept for their, version. So please use the Missouri DNR state approved version, not EPA's. That's just a general template. But in ours, here's the different ones. And I would recommend to systems read that inventory instructions, that red tab first, start with that, because that might answer a lot of your common questions there. Missouri LSLI, lead service line inventory, that's your main data entry tab. There are a couple things of data to enter on the inventory data submission when you're finally, ready to submit to the state. And for the small inventory spreadsheet, a lot of them will be able to email that, attach an email directly. And if the file is too big, they can ask us for credentials to upload it to a secure FTP site. So like those systems that have that 500,000, version, that's not going to attach to an email. It's too large a file. So just contact us and request that information to upload it.
You got any other questions?
Yes. If a meter set was installed after 1989 and the house was built after 1989, is it exempt from lead?
It should be, but that doesn't guarantee it wasn't put in, because there were a lot of plumbers that had stuff on the truck still yet, and they weren't going to scrap it. They were going to use it until it was gone. So that's why you have to verify it.
10% with the 95% confidence. And it's a random inspection. Just to verify that that system did comply with the Missouri lead ban.
Right. Any others? All right.
Next slide.
Next slide. Okay, there's the inventory instructions, and you all can read that on your own time, just a general information there. Next slide. Okay, so here's the color coding. So that kind of shows that pink column is optional just for risk tier calculation of your sample sites. The yellow is the lock cells. So you should be able to access all the cells you need to enter data on the spreadsheet, but remember to click enable editing at the top of the page.
Very top.
Because sometimes systems get confused if they open that and they're like, I can't
You
enter
can't do
anything.
anything.
Can't
yeah.
do anything. That's
Yeah.
why. So just
Yeah.
click that enable editing
Yeah.
to be able to type in data.
And remember, the yellow boxes, you can't do nothing with anything.
Yeah, that's
You
locked.
can't type in, you can't do anything. Just,
Yeah.
it is locked.
If cells are locked, they're locked on
Yeah.
purpose. There's a
You
reason.
did it for a reason, didn't you?
Yeah, that's to guard the embedded formulas. And if systems do want to be able to collapse columns to make data entry easier, they can request a password specific
Mhm.
unlocked version and enter their data there or paste it in just to contact me if you need that. And next slide. Okay, so here's our approved identification methods.
Yep.
And a lot of these are taken directly from EPA's table. And you'll notice that predictive modeling says not ID
Yep.
method. It may be helpful to you, though, for targeted search, and there are definitely benefits and uses. And then we do mention for number 7 and 8, paper records, 10% validated accuracy, and number 8, digital database records. So we recommend start there first. Save yourselves as much time as possible. If you have some sort of pre-existing records, as-built plans. Or if you've seen what's put in the ground and stuff yourself, those can all be evidence based records. Okay, next. Question.
Yeah.
For utilities that have a newer system and new homes, is it okay to submit the spreadsheet early?
If you finish your inventory and you have records
And know what it
already
is, yeah.
and know what it is, that's awesome.
Right.
Save yourself time. If you can submit it to us.
We
early,
actually
then
encourage,
that'd be
get it
great,
submitted as soon as you got it done, because if we get 1,700 of them on October 16th of
Yeah.
2024, it's going to be an issue for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And I went in the next slide.
there's just definition of terms.
Yep.
There, when we talk about lead and copper rule improvements, lead and copper rule revisions, and lead and copper rule improvements, that's maybe proposed this summer of 2023. So some of those answers, when that new rule, if it's proposed and it replaces lead and copper rule revisions before the compliance date, it'll kind of erase it almost like the LCRR never existed, but that initial inventory deadline is going to remain.
Yeah, it's going to stay.
And, the guidance for that and everything. So just focus on your inventory, making progress on that for now, because that's still going to be here. That's the important thing. To focus on. Next slide. Okay, so this shows the data entry page. So when you enable editing, at that top row, column A, you see that orange cell, you can enter your public water system ID number. And when you hit enter, it should look up the common name for that one. And it'll run those all the way down the column. So column A and column C, most of those cells are locked on purpose. And column B, the system specific ID is unlocked. And systems, you want
Let's
to.
go to that one right there real quick.
Yeah,
System ID. That you're saying, now we can use a meter number,
Mhm.
but if you change that meter, you're going to have to update.
Mhm.
Now, anything like say a account number,
Account numbers can change too. If you close
anything
one
that's
account.
going to change, you're going to have to update.
There are some water systems out there that I've talked to before that they have a service connection number, so that number's never going to change.
Okay.
So if water systems want to start adopting a service connection number, they can put that in there.
Okay.
And that'll be a number that never changes. But if that address is always going to stay the same, but a customer number could change and your meter number can change.
Right. Another question that here, can you use longitude and like say the ones that use GPS?
Yeah.
Can they use that longitude and latitude number?
Yeah, and that's a great thing because it
Okay.
tells you the location as well. And and that's going to be unique, number
Identifier.
identifier. So that's really helpful. And if systems don't want to pay for a GPS unit, they had talked about some of the variability with the accuracy of phones, that could be 10 to 20 feet, off. But if you use like Google Earth or something, you can, visually zoom in, click on there. You can set it to like decimal degrees if that's helpful.
Well, Howard, he had a class yesterday with Ben Hill on diamond maps. He's gonna come in here in a little bit and talk about it some more. About how they've integrated your spreadsheet
Uh-huh.
to Diamond Maps. So he's gonna talk about that. So that was one question I know that was asked yesterday.
Yep.
Was that number, so, and they
Yep.
can use it.
Yep.
Yeah, it can be kind of any number, but they do want, ideally to be a fixed
It's
reference.
got, yeah.
Yeah, to identify that.
Great question, just come in. Do supporting records paper trail need to be submitted with the spreadsheet? How
No.
do districts handle the preservation of the supporting documentation?
Right. That's a good question. They don't have to submit that. We don't want to see that. We want to
Yeah.
see the spreadsheet and that's it. You keep all those records on file for you in your water system. Now, EPA has a record retention deadline of 12 years. I would keep it forever. Don't go by that. I would keep it forever, But if EPA comes in and hassles you into something that's over 12 years, you can say, well, your record retention is 12 years. The record you're asking for past that 12-year period, you can hold them to that. But the best thing to do is for information like this is to keep it forever. And that way, if there is ever an audit or a customer comes in and says something about that specific service, you can go back in your records and you can look. There's a lot of
Digital,
benefits.
paper,
Mhm.
Yeah.
whichever you want to,
Right.
whichever you prefer, I guess.
Right.
Yep. And if you click on those headings, do you see that like pop up there about the service address? And so that helps systems if you want to see what the data entry might look like, or you need some hints. That top row there is going to be frozen as you scroll up and down. Just click those headings and a quick pop-up message will kind of show up and help explain that a little bit better.
What's this?
Also, the view only example tables on that yellow tab there will show you a list of like hypothetical data and also show you like what some of those end results for the calculated embedded formula cells will look like.
Cool.
And if you need to split your service address or zip code, we had a lot of systems that were copying their service, address. They might have like a billing spreadsheet. Just be careful that you're not pasting the formatting from that billing software onto the spreadsheet, because that will, when you paste something, you're overwriting those cells. And if you're trying to paste multiple columns and there's only, one column for the address and a separate one for a zip code, you can separate those out real easily if you use a flash fill function in Excel. You can paste them down, paste as text only, and then there's great tutorials online, or contact me if you need a link.
That's it right there. Contact Austin.
Yeah, there's a YouTube tutorial that shows that flash fill, because you can merge data into a single column. You can separate the pieces of it out automatically in Excel very easily. You don't have to go manually line by line by line, retyping that. So yeah, save yourselves the trouble. And yeah, I can send you that link if you need that information. Yep, question.
Couple questions, I believe. Can we enter an address for the system specific ID, or do we have to create a numbering system?
I think, no, we don't recommend using the addresses.
Well, the address is going to be there
Specific ID.
on that
Oh,
line.
Yeah, column D.
So,
right.
yeah.
Or
So,
on ours, it has to be the specific address,
Right.
but the one that they use to provide to their public, they don't have to have that specific address. They can use anything else.
did that get it?
They got it.
Okay,
Yeah, because it has to be tied to a location. So
right.
yeah, for the state submitted one, we need to know what location. Yeah, what address or location that's tied to.
Anything else? No?
Next
Okay.
slide.
Okay, yeah, I can go next slide there. Okay, yeah, so this shows some examples. Was lead ever upstream of the service? So this is the important column determining that galvanized requiring replacement that may be downstream. So for that service line, if there was a lead service line confirmed or unknown, potentially lead, that, yeah, you would put, yes, that could be, or it has unknown as an option. So put yes, no, or unknown.
Yeah.
Depending on, the information. Public water system owned service line material. Yeah, there's a list of the options there. So if you double click on that cell in that row, it'll show a drop down menu and you can choose one of those options or click the arrow at the lower right of that. And it must be one of those specific answers that's recorded there, because we need standardized data. If we just left it as fill in the blank, we would get, 1,000 different versions. Some might put lead, some might abbreviate it PB,
Yeah.
some might put LD, so we want to standardize the information. On your personal one, you might have it recorded differently, but when you publish it for the state, you need to use those standard, terms there. And there again, if you used a different identifier, use flash fill, convert, PB to the full word lead with a capital L,
Right.
beginning, it's very easy to convert that. And you can select down the column, that control shift down arrow, keep tapping till it highlights all the way down. Very easy to transfer onto a, different spreadsheet and make edits and paste it in. So this will allow copy and paste. Just be aware when you're pasting, it could delete some of that formatting. So that's one nice thing with having the drop down menus. If you're, typing in or selecting those options, it's already pre-selected for you. And you might need to pull that slider up or down to see all the options available, because Excel only shows, I think, the first 8. So if there's more selections available, just pull that scroll bar up or down.
Drop down
Yes.
menu question.
Yeah.
What should I do if none of our drop down menus open?
You might need to enable editing.
Enable editing. That's-
Yeah, click that at the top, because those should automatically open when you click the colored headings of those columns. And if not, you can contact me later. We'll figure it out.
Right. And the other thing is back up that sheet every time you get done working up with it at the end of the day, back it up to make sure that you don't lose something.
Yeah. And keep an extra copy.
Yep.
That's good, because there was one system I talked to, they only had one copy and their file got corrupted when they were trying to close it. And they had to kind of start over.
Kinda, they had to start over.
Yeah. So, and thankfully they were a smaller system, but it was still like a week or two's worth of effort was lost. So,
Yeah.
yeah, always have file saved 2 places, I recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Nope.
All right.
Are we running blue 120 waters?
Now we've got all kinds of time.
Okay.
Okay.
We got all
I'm
kinds
just
of
getting
time for
worried.
them. So, whatever you want to talk about left on your screens, more of the spreadsheet, any more spreadsheet questions? Now's the time to ask.
Yep. And this kind of, shows how the, information's entered there. We can go on as years. We have all 4 digits for the year just to make sure, is it 1900s
Yeah,
or
just can't put
2000?
70 in there, huh?
Yeah, so do have that as 4 digits.
Okay,
And we can go into the next one. Okay, and this shows customer owned service line material. There's options there again, copper, PVC, galvanized, HDPE, other non-lead, asbestos cement or lead. And different diameter for customer owned service line size, the year, building type. So that building type goes into like the risk tier
Right.
calculation. So you have single family. There was one person that commented, why isn't subdivisions listed there? And it's like the multifamily might capture,
yeah,
some of those. And this for risk tier calculation basically breaks it down into 3 things. It's either single family, multifamily, or non-transient, non-community. So all the school, childcare, business, hospital, nursing home, those are all non-transient, non-community. So in the equation, that's what it's going to paste for that. But
Yeah.
just, to help systems and us to kind of know more specifically what those are, there's those options, but I hope that helps explain.
Yep.
That part of it. And next,
Question, last green column ask about sample sites. Is this current sites or ones we might use later?
let's see.
I think that's at the far end of right before the comment row.
No.
Oh, right before the
cool.
comment, might fast forward to, if they're referring to like the pink column.
She said it was a
Oh, will
green
this,
column.
will the sample site be used in your sample site plan? I think is the one they're referring to. Yeah, that just kind of is for the systems kind of information to know.
It could be.
It could be if that's helpful. And it's just kind of asking, are you plan to use this as
Yep.
a sample site or not? And
So some of the things that are built into the spreadsheet are for water systems use that we really don't care about, but it's to help them out
Which
in
I
the
think is
future.
gonna get to this next question. Can you attach photos to the spreadsheet?
Not to the
Yeah.
spreadsheet.
And that column may help with your sample site pool, because ideally you should have enough locations and talk with customers, to know which ones you want to ask to use the sample
Now,
sites.
Do you go on? I mean, you go all the way at the end, right? Click it one
Yeah.
more time. Let's
Yeah,
see.
it keeps going. Yeah, there's those pink columns. That's the
Yeah.
optional for
Yeah.
the premise plumbing structure, primary
And,
structure.
and
tier.
that's what she was talking about, I believe, this last green one right
Yeah,
here.
this location will be used for lead and copper sample site plant. Yeah, so that's just.
And if you put unknown in this, it will not hurt you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That column there, you can put unknown
Yeah.
because you don't really know if it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for the water systems use right there.
Yeah, this column, it doesn't affect
Yeah.
the calculation of the service line or anything. So some of that, yeah, it's just information to help system. Yeah, next.
But you see some of these dates like between 89
Yeah.
and 2014. So, and that's all on the drop down box too.
Yep.
So,
Well,
Yep.
some of the years, they might have to type it in.
oh, over
or
here.
paste. Yeah, those
But
can
but
vary.
that
Talking
green
about
one,
this.
that's
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the drop down. Yeah, the green and blue should have drop down menus.
pointing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
yep. Okay,
Good
question.
I wanted to ask you about on the system specific number at the very beginning of the spreadsheet. Do we have to be consistently the same number? For example, can we intermix route numbers with GPS coordinates? Can we? Does it have to be the same number?
Well, I think it'd be to system's benefit to try to keep it
It
uniform.
is, but I'm gonna give you a scenario. We may have a meter that's out in the middle of a pasture somewhere that does not have an address. But
Yes,
we may use, and they may not have a route number for it, they may not have an account number for it,
yeah,
But you
but
could use
they could have a
GPS.
GPS
yeah,
coordinates
yeah,
for it. So I mean,
Yeah.
not to make a big mess out of it, but to actually say we could use a different number that's specific to that
Yeah.
meter. Okay,
yeah, sure. Yeah,
cool.
yeah. it
Good
makes sense.
question.
Yeah, good question.
Now we ran him off.
How important is it to have the year customer-owned service line was installed?
Well, there again, that helps with risk tier calculation, and we're kind of presuming that the construction date of the building. Well, for the service line material, it might vary, like for the premise, plumbing, we're assuming construction date is when the plumbing was installed. But yeah, that does help with the risk tier calculation for the customer owned. Yeah, any comments? Jeff on that?
Larry had a question about column Q, point of entry. Have we gotten there yet?
Yeah, I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Okay. Hold your question, Larry. We'll get to it. Promise.
Actually,
Okay.
we can probably go to it. Or
Yeah.
Go to, oh,
Or let's see,
back the other way.
or pointy, oh, well, go back
Go back.
maybe. Go back one more, single family, multifamily. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's still further down. Yeah, let's keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it then.
Tell me
Yeah,
which slide we need.
okay. Yeah, keep going. Yeah,
Go down.
yeah, go down. Yeah, or this one. Maybe I'll cover this while we're
Okay.
on this slide. Yeah, so this is for those state approved ID methods. And you would enter a number and a comma after that, because some were saying there's no drop down menu option for these, but if you
Yeah.
click the heading, it'll say, enter the number, it corresponds to whatever method. So it's doesn't have to be, all visual inspection or anything. That might be a last resort if you don't have any sort of other records or information or sampling to go by. But yeah, you just enter one or more methods there with commas in between.
However many, you might have 5 or 6.
Yeah,
You may have just one.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
Oops.
that can vary. Yep. Can go on to the next one. Let's see, because yeah, we did have a question, or one of the columns was like the point of use, is the point of use or point of entry filter in use, and that's really pertaining to just your sample site locations. That's not, something you need to know for label for each one of them, just if you're using a house as a sample site, because that does change the risk tier. So if you, do have like a water softener,
that's what I was gonna say.
that would make it tier
Yeah.
F2.
Yeah, under this.
under the current,
We don't know what'll be under.
current
I think-
LCR.
I think they lumped a lot of those just into representative samples, what they're calling the new tier.
Okay.
So that would be a representative.
And ideally, you don't want to use a point of use treatment site as a sample
As a
site
sample
if you
site.
can avoid it, if you can find ones that are, tier 1, which is the highest risk.
So if you have a sample site now,
Yeah.
before they didn't have one, a filter system or whatever,
Yeah.
they do now, you
Yeah.
can change it.
Right, yeah, you normally would either try to find another location is what you're supposed to do, because they no longer meet the tier criteria that they used to
Right.
occupy. And that, since that has changed, you can do a sample site change and send that in when you do your lead and copper testing.
Right.
Yeah, and the only reason like they had to create that tier F2 is because there's some systems where everyone's on softener or treatment, and systems where like we can't find,
Right.
an area that doesn't have a water softener or some point of use treatment, but that could, potentially impact the, reduce the lead or whatnot. So it's like, there's some cases where there's no alternative. That's why that tier category exists, but ideally you don't want to use sites that's using treatment or reverse osmosis or filter that removes metals, because we want to know what the quality of the tap water
Right.
is, straight from the source or coming out of the
Any
tap.
questions? Okay.
Mhm.
Go to the,
Okay. Yeah, or those yellow columns, just show the auto calculate. Yes, we could go back one. That does show like the auto calculated results and those embedded formulas.
go back one.
Yeah, so, and that replace gooseneck pigtail connector. The way that formula is written, it automatically says, yes, there's a connector unless you put no there. So if you, have it blank or you put unknown, it's just going to flag that as a yes,
Okay.
just as an assumption. But that might not actually mean there is one. So that's just the way kind of the formula was put together. And the lead service line category inventory, that's your label for the total service line. So if 1/2 is confirmed lead service line, it's going to label it as lead. And if there's galvanized requiring replacement, it's going to put GRR. It might put other non-lead or your unknowns, possibly lead. Yeah. And is galvanized requiring replacement present? I did include a column there that will still show if there is a galvanized segment. So you notice that third one, that third row down, it has the category inventory as lead, but there is a galvanized portion
Mhm.
present there. So, that might, I don't know if that's helpful, but that's, it does show that galvanized requiring replacement as well. The risk tier calculation. Calc type, single family, multifamily. Yeah, so some of those columns are just to kind of aid the formulas and doing the math there. But
Yeah.
requires a risk mitigation or point of use picture filter. They put yes or no. I think there again, it's going to say yes unless.
Now, let's get into that in just a minute. Quick question. If it says yes, the system has to provide that for it?
Well, this is another column where it kind of just says yes by default if it's blank, but the rule, the lead and copper rule revisions, it does talk about the need to provide if there's a disturbance.
Right.
To provide,
And disturbance is a big word.
yeah,
A lot of things could be
Can be
disturbance.
disturbance,
yes.
So,
Yep. Yeah, if they're doing like potholing. Yeah, that, disturbs the pipe or jostles it, that could be considered disturbance, and they would provide a point of use filter and they specify up to 6 months. So if you're providing a single filter, it needs to cover 6-month period or 120 gallons of water. Some filters have lower gallon ratings, like 20 gallons each, so you might have to provide multiple. Then it's probably more cost effective to just use a filter that covers 6 months and provide that to the customer. But that's a new provision. It's not compliant yet in the current rule, but whichever LCRR, LCRI that goes into compliance.
probably will be.
Yeah, probably will be. And it's still a good practice that we do recommend. We can't require it right now, but that is still recommended because there could be elevated levels of lead following replacement or disturbance in the drinking water for that specific household. So it's still a good precaution. That's recommended.
Any more questions?
Spreadsheet question. Wes asked, so I checked to see if editing was enabled, and it is. I can type in the boxes and right click on them and click select from drop down box, but when the drop down opens, there are no options. Do I maybe have a corrupted copy?
Maybe so. Yeah, I try re-downloading and extract that. And yeah. And if they need help, I can attach one directly in an email later, but they can contact me directly to resolve that.
Next question, how should districts inventories deal with new homes constructed between now and October 24, the submission deadline, such as continuously add new customers and meters?
Yeah, they can add new customers meter to the spreadsheet. We had one instance where water system was adding new customers and they wanted all of their meter IDs to be in chronological, well, not chronological order, I guess numerical order. And they were having trouble in certain ones, so they wanted to add a row. And the way that we told them was just to keep them scrambled, it doesn't make any difference. And then when you're ready to actually submit it or do it, you can actually do the sort and filter, and it'll filter those and put them in the numerical order that you want.
Yeah. And there's been times where I've, copied data to a blank spreadsheet and, removed spaces or, changed the edits with that flash fill and then just pasted it, back in. So if there's that one specific column that you need to adjust names, it might be beneficial, separate that, get your names corrected and then, put it back in. But yeah, if you want it to resort, you need to use the filter and that would move the rows and the data corresponding with those.
Cool.
Yeah.
You Mark?
One moment, please. We're going to go radio dead for just a moment.
That's okay.
Okay, we're back. Sorry.
Any more questions, Andrew?
You want to move on?
No questions at the moment.
Okay, yeah, should we, move on in the spreadsheet? Yeah, to the next example. Okay, so here's the inventory data submission tab. And this should auto populate based on the information you entered before, but you'll need to enter your name, the date of submittal, total number of full replacements, total number of customer refusals. So it is good in the comments column to keep track of that. Yeah, because that is, something.
Now, I did have a question on this at one of the classes, the collector's name. Is it the guy that's putting the information in or the chief operator that is over the system?
I would say that the person that's actually doing the submitting, that's created the
The one
spreadsheet
that's
and everything,
actually
that would be the
typing it in.
one that would need to do that.
Okay. Because that did come up a couple times. I'm chief operator. Do I have to sign it or? And I said, well, that's a good question for Jeff. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and that way, if there's some, question we have, just to clarify like how data was entered, or if there's, like a missing thing, we would know who to contact and
And
ask.
don't have to go through 3 or 4 people saying,
Yeah.
who done this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and next slide. Okay, and this is really helpful.
Yeah.
To this sheet. So this is the printout sheet that they can use for inspection, like out in the field of the service line. It has the parameters all entered on there. They can circle which one applies from each column. And that's nice on a single-sided page. You can see that information.
Now, I've told people in the class, take this sheet, print it off. Get several copies, put it on a clipboard.
Yep.
If you got 2 or 3 trucks, put them in a truck. And you can put your water ID number in there and it'd be on all of them. So you just print it out, keep it in there. If you got a boring company that's doing something and they hit your line or hit a service line, you can write that stuff down. You've visually seen that because you're going to have to fix it anyway.
Yeah, or if you're doing meter replacement.
Meter replacement, anything. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's really helpful. that we offer at Page. It's already.
Yep.
And it should be pretty much in order. The comments box, I did have to move that up just to get
Yeah.
it fit on a page.
Yeah,
But the other ones, those should be in the correct
pretty
order
much, yeah.
that you type it in. So, yeah. I
It's
got-
handy. That
Yeah.
sheet is handy.
Okay, and yeah, this goes to the view only examples, that yellow tab there. And this just shows like what data entry might look like. For some systems, this is just kind of made up data, but just because I know it might be helpful for them to see if they're wondering like, okay, what exactly do I type in for the address or the system common name? So this just shows like an example
Right.
of what information correctly entered would look like. Yeah, it can go on to the next slide there. Yeah, and this just shows those drop down menu options. They link to here. So that's the total list. If you want to be able to see those at a glance. That's really handy.
Mhm.
Yeah, too.
Had a question. Can meter ID and address be transferred from billing to the spreadsheet?
Yeah,
Like an import, I'm presuming.
yeah, if you copy and paste like the
Great.
columns, I would paste it as text only. But yeah, they should be able to select a column and paste it. I would paste as text only, so you're not copying source formatting, because we have had multiple calls where systems were, pasting from a different sheet and it pasted in some of the math or formatting. Because remember, when you click on a cell, you're just seeing like the cell value, number, but when you click on it, it'll show if there's an embedded formula hidden. That's hidden unless you click on it, and then you look up above and see if there's a math formula or function. Yep, entered for that. Okay, and next slide, yep, shows an example of like specific year or unknown, yeah, different types. And yeah, if you want to just scroll through a couple of those. So yeah, you all can view those. Yeah, on that yellow tab, just to be helpful. And there it shows the ID methods and what entry of those numbers might look like. And yeah, it shows like the risk tier options under the LCR. Those could change under, the new rule when it goes into compliance. Yeah, then we have a lookup table that includes, water system names. Now, if it's a brand new system, there could be some potentially missing from this list, because we can't go in the future and know like new systems that are going to be
Yeah.
added. But if you enter the ID number, it can probably update or correct that. Yeah,
Right.
later.
And there's the comment
Yeah, additional comments so you can document.
at the very end of the sheet.
Yeah, if
So,
there's a customer refusal or something. And you should be able to add, additional columns. So systems might, in those white columns to the right
after
of that.
Yeah,
Those several of those should be unlocked. You can insert more. And the system might record their own personal, notes or contact
Right.
or name of, who was on site inspecting that. So you can always, the system can add their own information.
Lori had a question. So the service address doesn't need the city? Lori, you're gonna have to be more specific. I read that and thought the same. I think I know what you're thinking, but I don't wanna speak for you.
Now. I think she's saying, here's the address. Do we need to put
The city in it.
Oh,
Ashland, Missouri, 65452 or something like
But if you're a district and you serve 2 or 3 cities,
yeah.
then that would be
that?
relevant.
And it would be.
Yeah, it would be easy. And there again, that's something you could add with like flash fill or some other, feature. So it would be nice if they could specify, the full address and not just, the street name.
City to her county.
Column D, okay.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I think it,
And if they put the address in there and then they put, the city that it's in, there's no reason that that's gonna hurt anything.
Yeah.
shouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and this just kind of goes into text information on the rule and the deadlines and stuff like that, but I think that pretty much covers the
Okay.
spreadsheet.
No more questions at this moment.
Okay,
I say at this moment.
I'm gonna yell at Howard, see if Howard.
He can hear you.
Okay, come on in here, Howard. I want to thank Jeff and Austin both today. Have you got anything else that you want to pass on?
No, I think we've covered it pretty good.
I think we did too.
Yeah.
And like you said, if systems have a question, they can call you. I don't know I have it on mine, but you don't have your information on there. You have your
Right. And
information on.
if you need our information too, you can get through Missouri Rural Water Association's website to our DNR website,
Right.
and then on our webpage for lead service lines, both our contact information, both email and phone number.
Right.
For direct lines are on that, so you can get it there too.
So it's out there if you need it. I've got their numbers, so I can pass that along too. So want to thank you guys for being here today. Austin, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Any more questions? If not, we're gonna do the second portion of this.
We have one question.
Okay.
Clarify classifying as lead-free for systems, please.
And lead-free, like other non-lead or
Uh,
non-lead material.
Probably reading it right there on that. The second one down, it says clarifying they are
certified they're
lead-free.
lead-free.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we do have like some systems in the past, or maybe Jeff would like to dive into
Right.
that.
In the lead and copper rule, there were water systems that could be on a 9-year schedule for lead and copper testing, and that meant that they had to certify in the past that they were lead-free. They didn't have any lead or copper there because we only give out a full waiver, not a partial waiver, like one for lead specifically or one for copper specifically. It was both lead and copper.
Right.
And if a water system was able to certify, back then that they were lead-free, then we can pretty much say that water system's lead-free. They've certified in the past that they were.
Oh, okay.
And there's a provision in the rule that if you are lead-free, then you don't have to do that inventory. But most water, there's not very many. Out of 1,700, we had in the history of Missouri 257 water systems that have had a 9-year waiver.
Okay.
And most of those certified they were lead-free, but some of them lost it because they couldn't guarantee that there weren't copper plumbing in the premises, because premise plumbing does come into account with that 9-year waiver. You can't have any copper or any lead inside people's homes to be able to get that waiver.
Yeah.
And right now we only have 50 water systems that have a 9-year waiver. So they're the ones that are certified currently.
And they've already done investigating or have records, to verify. So they've sort of done their inventory already,
But years ago.
but years ago. So we see no reason why that information, is, can't be used.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
This will be the last question for Jeff and Austin.
Yep.
And here's the question. When I fill in column H as yes, it fills in column Z as no. Grr, why?
I might have to double check on.
Well, probably have to go, what is it? Let's scroll back to Kim, go back to the.
Yeah, so some of the questions are kind of contingent on if they answer yes, then it puts a no, or
So Q, no, not Q, H. He was looking at Z, GRR present. No GRR present. Oh, it's not GR.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Okay, column H, where was it
So
at?
let's go back to H.
Right
There
there.
was.
well, yeah, was lead ever upstream?
Yeah.
So there again, if they put unknown, it's assuming
Yep.
that there could be a lead service
Yep.
line currently or historically upstream of
Yep.
that
He was
galvanized.
putting no,
But I
right?
think he's filling in column H as yes.
Oh, it's yes.
And then it's populating no in G and Z.
Well, if they continue filling out the, spreadsheet, it'll indicate, you might have to, because there's some of these you have to fill out multiple columns for it to fully calculate.
Yeah.
Come up with the right answer.
To come up with the right answer. So, yeah, I would advise them, please fill out that,
Fill it out.
that whole service line row, and then you'll see the correct formulas.
Well, we've got to move on. Guys, I really thank you guys for being here. I know you've answered a lot of questions today. Appreciate it. You want to take like 5 minutes?
I just
Right.
took over.
Uh,
The cameraman, the camera's heavy on my shoulder and I have to take a moment.
okay.
We're going to take a 5-minute break before we have our next presenters up. So at 11:09, we'll say 11:10,
We'll have
we're going to resume.
We'll have Howard Baker going diamond maps.
Yep.
And right after that, we'll do a
121. Okay, it is 11:11. Sorry about the 1-minute delay. We are now joined by MRWA Executive Director Howard Baker. He's going to talk about diamond maps and he's going to be referring to somebody else in the meeting. So without any further ado, I'm going to switch the microphone over to Howard. Here you go.
All right, I know y'all been this has been kind of a drug out deal here, the 2 hour class. But I want to real quickly, since we're talking about these spreadsheets, what we've done, we worked with Ben Hill at Diamond Maps to get that spreadsheet added to the GIS map, which will make things work a lot easier for you if you're set up for it. And I'm going to demonstrate some of the things it'll do real quick. And then I may have, and I know that Ben Hill's with us, and I may have him pop on here real quick, but we'll get you his phone number. You can call him and ask all the questions. But let me kind of show you what's the advantage of putting this on your map. And real quickly, if you go, I'm going to show you that on the layer that we're working on the meters, since you already have the existing information about that meters, that's what we would actually add the template, which, let's see if I can get it down here and show you when this thing clicks in. Oh, well, this is where the lead and coppers do it like this. It speeds the process up. But the inventory sheet starts right here, and it'll start working its way down, and it's an exact copy. That's what makes this work really well. It's an exact copy of what you would get from DNR. The drop down menus work exactly the same. And when you get done using this at any time, you can transfer this from this mapping back into the Excel spreadsheet that DNR wants. And but so you wind up having a visual cue of how much stuff you've got done, which kind of helps. And for instance, the way you do it when you work on an Excel spreadsheet is you go line by line by line to put this information in. So we can eliminate some of that repetitive typing. If you know, for instance, I'm going to say that these houses down here, I know for a fact were built last year.
Yep.
They built all these houses last year. We don't have a copper issue. We were actually there. We seen them when they ran the water. We know everything there is to know about this place. It's not going to happen very often, but we got a little bit. So the real simple part of this is we go up to menu. We're going to run over to select and modify. I'm just going to draw a square around them. And all these houses, I'm going to work on at the same time. Instead of doing line by line, it doesn't matter if it's 5 houses or 55 houses or 500 houses. It's all the same thing. We're going to set the field value on these. And what I'm going to look at, we could run down through this entire list, but y'all have done that. Y'all done this for the last 2 hours. I'm not going to go over this list. All right. But I want to show you what will happen. If we wanted to put the zip code in for everybody at one time, I could click on here and add the zip code for everybody. When I get down to where is the private owned customer owned service line material, which seems to be the big question.
Right.
Okay, so right here for these houses I've already selected. The drop down menu again is exactly the same.
Drop down box, just like the spreadsheet.
The same wording, so everything works. It's all exactly the same. I'm going to say that every one of these houses were PVC. We know that. And I can do this all the way down for everything on this spreadsheet. And again, I'm not going to go through this spreadsheet. Y'all beat that one. We got it. We've got the spreadsheet. And then be sure and hit apply. Now hit apply. And let's see, I'm going to go up here and close this. Okay. And clear this. And you'll notice that these things have changed colors. So these are settings that you set up in your map. But now I know that if I had completed that entire worksheet, I have answered that one important question that I needed to know. What was the customer side inventory sheet? Mm-hmm. I can now look at this map and piecemeal this thing. I can do if there's parts that have lead, if there's parts that have PEX in it, if there's or you can do them individually. I can go down and click one at a time and and fill out all the information about that one particular system. So I can start right here. Let's see, one of the things we talked about this feature ID number, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
don't let me forget about that. I want to talk about that before we get off of here. So that one item, and we go down to here, and if we filled out the entire sheet and we went to that customer's part of the line right here, the material, and I'm gonna say, I know for a fact that this one's lead, you know. I'm gonna put lead on there and I'm gonna hit apply. And you'll notice that now it's changed to a different color.
Yep.
Those colors have been based upon, you can pick them, you can decide how they look. We go into settings, and I just want to kind of show you where this is coming from. The fill capacity is based on these colors right here. Okay, so they're already set up. And the way I set this particular map up, I didn't care. I didn't differentiate between the HPD, the PEX or PVC, because all those I'm clear on. They're
Right.
not lead, and I don't care. I mean, as
Right.
long as they're not lead and they're on the good side. So I mean, I can break them down into different colors, but we're leaving it as one solid, as in groups. So now I can, like I said, the biggest asset about this is you can visually look and keep track of where you are and how much stuff you've got done and how much more stuff you have to do. I know that one of the questions that got brought up, they were asking about, you know, trying to come up with a number that was unique about this particular
Mhm.
meter. And some systems, they don't have an account number that's set still. So one of the things, just a suggestion to look at, if we look at the meters, and I go to browse, something that's kind of unique about the GIS stuff is this feature ID number. This is generated in the mapping process when you make this map. So now that feature ID number is unique to this meter on this row. So you could use that number and it will identify that's unique for this one. Of course, if you made changes like they talked about earlier, if you make a change, it needs to be updated, then you just make those updates.
And you could do that on here too, because if you go change it, say you're using the meter numbers,
Right.
and you go out and change that meter, you can change that in here and
Correct.
update your spreadsheet.
Correct. And that would automatically, the next time
Okay.
you download this. So and again, there's going to be another part that I'm not going to go all the way into because I've let Ben Hill talk about this. But once you get this on your map and periodically, you may want to download this and look at it. There's a simple process that we're going to do export. It's already built into Diamond Maps. It will export it into the DNR spreadsheet, and that you don't have to go download it from somewhere. It's already
It's
here.
already there.
It's already there. And then you would take that spreadsheet and it's going to react. You can turn it into DNR, or you can look at it and decide you know there's something you didn't like. You need to make some changes. Because there's error reports that goes along with this. So when you do the export, if you forgot to put some information in blanks, there's an error report that will jump up and tell you, hey, you forgot to put the zip code in every one of these.
Oh, okay.
And you go, okay, I need to go back and fix that. Now I need to put a zip code in for everybody. So you got a question?
Question.
Can you show again how you highlighted multiple meters?
Sure. All right. And again, this part of it is the GIS map. It's the same. This has gotten really nothing to do with the adding the template. We're going to go down and just hit this select and modify tool, which is underneath the menu button. Select and modify. We want to make sure now, but this is a test map, so I don't have all of the other valves and manholes. I just have meters on here. So, but you do need to make sure this you select what it is you're working on, and of course, meters is the ideal category for putting this on your map because the dot already exists. That initial information is already there. You don't have to make it up as you go. And then I can decide whether I want to use a box which will just kind of, it will actually draw a box. You know, it drag your mouse, it makes a box. If I go up here and clear this and say I don't want to use that, and say I want to use, now I can actually draw a circle and be a little bit more specific. So those are a couple of different ways, or you could actually do one at a time. But once you select that, the main thing is you can go down to set field values. And when you hit the set field values, and remember, this is for doing it multiple times. You're going to do it for everyone. You can do it individually, and I'll show you that in just a second, but how it looks a little different. Once we go to this list, you are going to do, it's going to hit them all at the same time, every one of them. So everyone has been highlighted. And I hope that answers your question about, how we get there. But now I'm going to cancel everything that I've got up to this point, and I'm actually just do one again by itself. Looks like Ben's messing with me, turn my map off. Oh my gosh. So let's say that we filled this one out, and customer owned service material. And again, I'm just hitting one field.
Right.
I would, you're going to do all the fields.
Start at the top and work your way down.
You're going to do all the fields, but this is the one field that I have it broke down so it will change colors when we make an action happen. And you can switch that to any of them you want. Any field can be activated as a color changing event. Okay. And of course, the way with this is set up, if you'll kind of notice, the orange ones are the ones that haven't been worked on yet. So you got a lot more work to get.
Got a lot more to do.
Ben Hill with diamondmaps.com. I know he's on here. We'll probably put his phone number up here in just a second. And unless I get asked a specific question that I can't answer, I'm not going to make Ben get on here and do this, but he's here to answer questions if we need to. Was there any other questions on this? It doesn't look like there's. Okay. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details about this thing, other than the fact that it's available and it'll make your life a lot easier. It's a little easier to keep rhyme and reason of what you're doing with your map. Of course, if you already have diamond maps and you've got a map going, you're really close to having this right. done and being able to take off and start using it. You can start a subscription with it and start putting the dots on yourself. You can actually walk around town, and everything reacts a little bit slower since we're on this Zoom thing. So kind of bear with me as we zoom in.
No pun intended.
Yeah. You can actually walk down the road and you can visually see where this house is. So if you're starting from scratch and you don't have a GIS map, if you wanted to put these dots in, you can actually you walk down the road, or you can sit in the office and go, I know there's a meter at this house, and I know there's a meter at this house. It doesn't have to be in the exact location. We can fix that later on. I was trying to think if there was another giant.
Trying to think of some questions that we had yesterday.
The GPS coordinates would automatically get generated when you put a dot down on here. So, earlier when we talked about the address and, so that may save you some time in creating this process. There's other features that are built into this. If there's information that you don't want to type in, like for instance, we'll go back to the address deal. Mm-hmm. You can, when you download this and add this to your map, and you don't really even download it, you just add this template to your map, you can tell it that you want the specific information to pull it from what you already exist in Diamond Maps and add it to the template or the
Okay,
DNR spreadsheet. I'm going to cut this really short. I just kind of want to put this out there that this is another tool. This doesn't fix everything. It's just another tool on how to do your inventory. You can use it or you cannot use it, but it works extremely well for helping you, especially keep that visual cue, how much stuff is done, where am I at? As your contract, if you go out, as you start going out and doing this, you can do this on the fly because you can actually use your cell phone when you're out.
yeah,
When you're outside, you could be standing in front of this house and you've had a leak, and so you're digging up your service line. You can actually you could pull up your phone, pull up this information and plug everything in right then and
you
right
haven't
there.
done that.
And it's done. And you don't have to go back and do it again.
I think we got a question.
Should we create a layer that reflects district-owned service lines?
District-owned service lines. I'm not sure what that question means, but you can. I mean, I understand what maybe the service lines pre-meter. I get, is that kind of what we're thinking here?
Wes, could you be a little more specific? Yes, pre-meter.
Pre-meter, yeah. I mean, you again, but the reality of it is you could actually use this template right there to indicate that.
Do what it.
Because the meter is already there. And if you write, you've got the customer side and you already have the district side.
Yeah.
To record that, so you don't actually have to make another shape file.
Yeah.
Ben said he would recommend adding a field to your meter layer to record which ones are district-owned rather than a separate layer.
Right. There you go. And again, part of the reason I'm gonna keep this short too is it's Diamond Maps has got videos on how to add this to your map, how to use this map. It's very easy to do. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to shortchange Diamond Maps here because I love this stuff, but I also don't want to spend, another 2 hours on this because I know y'all got things to do. And we got 120 Water coming in behind us to talk about some of the stuff that they can help with, some more options. Ben, I'll give you the opportunity here real quick. If you want to unmic yourself, or do I have to do it from here?
You have to let him.
Well, now this is going to be a little different. I don't run this end of it. How can I
Participants
Go
scroll down.
with participants up there. Click on participants.
participants? Okay, and then I got to find him, right?
Yep,
He's under the beach for a bin, right?
Mhm.
I went the wrong way.
Yeah.
All right.
Ben Hill.
and then click.
I'm here now.
Ben, you're live.
Howard, I think you covered it well. I don't
Can you
really
hear
have,
us, Ben?
can you hear me? I can hear you.
Have you got your mic turned on?
Let me
I can hear you. I'm unmuted.
hold on 2 seconds, Ben.
Okay.
Okay, try now, Ben. Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Great.
Howard, I think you covered it well. I don't really have anything to add there.
Okay.
We do describe this whole process at diamondmaps.com/lead. And I think that'll give you, kind of what Howard showed, and maybe a few more details there. And we're glad to help you guys with anything if you want to call or email us.
And I think that's where I'm going to kind of get off here and leave this is to go to his website, call him, email him. He'll help you fix this up. I'll answer your questions. There's videos on how this stuff works. So if you're interested, we can help you. Ben can help you. But today, if you want to start calling Ben right now, I'd be tickled to death. Okay. So if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to get off here because like I said, I'm trying to give everybody a chance to come in here and talk. Any questions? If,
That's it for that.
we must be perfect presenters, wouldn't you say? All right, I'm gonna drop this screen share. And 120 Water will be coming in right behind me. And I think we also gonna have our board president, Dave Waller, with him. So ask him questions.
Yeah, ask.
We're going to turn things now over to Steve Smith with 120 Water.
Well, this is the third part of our 2-hour session. Steve Smith, 120 Water, Dave Waller, our board president. 120 Water Steve's going to talk to you about what they could do to help you with this inventory, systems that have actually doing the inventory with them. So Steve, take it away.
Good afternoon, folks. I'm going to take a completely different approach in about 30 minutes or 25 minutes to go over what we're talking about. You guys have had really good questions. You've gotten down into the weeds. What I would prefer to do is take a 10,000-foot look at the process. And instead of being really specific, let's go with guidelines or guidance that you can use every day so that this process becomes a little bit easier and you take a longer look at it. And let's get there in 18 months. So, Andy, if you can do the next slide, please. While Andy's pulling this up, also, next week at the conference, I'll be there the whole week. I'm actually coming in a little bit early. So if there's anything specific on here that I can't get to, because I don't want to keep you guys too long, please stop by the booth. I don't know my booth number off the top of my head, but I'll be there the whole conference. So the three things we're going to cover are the lead and copper rule, and obviously that's been covered quite a bit. We're going to talk a little bit about 120 Water. We're based in Indianapolis, and then the path to compliance between now and 10/16/24, but then also 10/16/24 until forever. Because I think as you got the impression today, this needs to be a living document that you're going to be in all the time. And you need to do something now, but you need to think in advance, several years down the road, about how this is all going to work. So Andy, next slide, please. So we've covered this. Usually I give about 5 minutes here, but we covered this today. So I'm going to go absolutely to the next slide after this. We're going to go over this just a little bit. What we like to talk about is between now and 10/16/24, what you need to do. What 120 Water can do. It's not only inventory, but the whole disturbance was brought up. So we can do pitcher filter kits. We can talk about remediation. We can talk about additional testing. All the things that were brought up in the 2 hours with DNR, we can help you with. So I'm not going to get too specific about that, but we're going to be like a generalist. So you might have a GIS system. You might be working in your spreadsheet. You might have digital records that need to be digitized. We can do a whole bunch of services as the generalist to bring everything together for you. And then we can worry about how that comes together and then address everything that happens after 10/16/24. So next slide, please. So again, I had this set up to go a little bit more detailed because I didn't think we would dive quite as far as we did. So Andy, we're going to go to the next slide. I think that's one more of this and the next one after that. So like I said, you guys, I'm going to give you the high level overview. We are based right outside Indianapolis, so a town called Zionsville. I cover Indiana, Missouri, Texas, and Iowa. So I'm very familiar with the different PWSs in each of the states. We are actually in 40 different states, and we have 600 different customers. So we can do soup to nuts. We've been doing testing and inventory in some kind of combination for over 7 years. So that's what we're going to bring. And for the folks that are on here that I've met or the folks that are on here that I've talked to, I've always tried to provide information without trying to sell our services. So if you guys have started something, great. If you're started and you're frustrated, give me an email, give me a phone call. We are here to help get and give advice. If we are a fit, we are a fit. And I like to break it down in the time that I've done this into 3 categories of people that I talk to. One was kind of mentioned earlier today, about the folks that are fairly small or the folks that are going to turn in unknowns. And I can work with you guys and hopefully convince you to do something, but that's one group. There's another group that's out there that has started something, is realizing how long this process is going to be. I'd love to talk to you and compare ideas. So as I talk to other systems, I can share that. And then there's the third group of folks that say, I want something more than just the spreadsheet, because this is not going to go away. There's $15 billion behind this, $3 billion last year, $3 billion this year, $3 billion each of the 3 following years. It's trickling down to the states. Missouri has their money, Indiana has their money, but none of us are seeing it yet. So we're putting out the idea that you need to plan for 25, 26, 27, 28, especially if you have any type of replacements. So next slide. And this is where I want to take that higher level. So initially, everybody needs to develop a plan, which will be your preliminary inventory. When I say a plan or develop something, that's saying I know how many surfaces I have. I'm going to find that lead band date. I'm going to split my surfaces in half on that. I'm going to say post 88, post 89, whatever the state is finally going to settle on. I'm going to put those out there and get to them when I can, because you're going to have that 10% rule to verify that. But I'm really going to focus on the pre-88, pre-89s and find ways to know what I know, whether it's tap cards, surveys, whatever you do, find out what I know on that end and come up with an idea of how long this might take. Because right now, you don't know what you don't know. So we're encouraging everybody to look at your records, look at your stat sheets, look at anything you can, look at your as-bills, start putting together a plan. And it sounds like most people on this call have done that, which is great. But initially, just develop a plan to go forward, figure out what you have, and put it together in some fashion. Once you know what you know, and you know what you don't know, which is the big thing, that's when you need to put together a verification strategy. And in talking about having maps and a visual view of this, it's really important. Because if you look at that spreadsheet, you're going to go numb on it after a couple times of looking at it and a couple times of updating it. If you can have a visual picture, which we can help you with, that's going to be the best way to go about it. So you may know your system, and you may be thinking, I'm going to retire in 2 years and don't really want to do this anymore. But whoever follows you has to know the system. So let's put together a verification strategy that will help everybody get to the point that they need. And then finally, for the folks that actually have lead or galvanized needing replacements, or are forced into some kind of replacements because the trigger level kicks in on the unknowns, we can help with replacements, remediation, pitcher filter kits. We can do whatever is needed. But these are the 3 steps that we try to take people through. And I started last year doing this with folks in a big way. I want to get everybody started on this process now. We may not make it to phase 3, but you at least have to start with the phase 1 and begin developing a plan so you know what you have. Once you know that, you go into the verify again. And then after 24, after LCRI comes out, we can begin really discussing what needs to be done on continuing to eliminate the unknowns and then go after any lead or galvanized needing replacement. So, Andy, I was going to pause there. I'm going pretty fast to use my time. Plus, I need a drink of water. Are there any questions?
No questions yet.
Okay. Next slide, please. Oops. So when you're talking about putting together your initial inventory, as has been discussed with the whole 2 hours of DNR, put in every record that you have, no matter what format you're going to use. So your billing records, that's been talked about a lot. That's going to be your location identifiers. Any tap cards, paper records, anything that you have is going to count. I don't think that was emphasized enough.
Yeah.
But if you go back and read the EPA's guidelines, they're going to take about anything. And even if it's not specifically approved and it's knowledge you have in the back of your head, put it on the spreadsheet somewhere, put it in a database so that you know what you know. Any compliance reports, tax parcel data is going to be really important to get the pre-88s and the post-88s. We can help with that in a big way because we have access to national building data and tax parcel data. The schools and child care facilities was just briefly touched on. Missouri is unique in that there's funding for the schools to do their own testing. You guys are still gonna have to verify the lines after 24, but hopefully, and I've read up on the program, it'll take care of a lot of what has to be done with them. The tier sites, as been discussed on multiple levels, are all going to change, but the new ones are going to be based on what you produce to turn into DNR. Any as-built, capital projects, any kind of ordinances, all of this is going to work to get that preliminary inventory. If you do have a GIS system, that's great. What we do as a software company, and we are software, we are not boots on the ground, is we can take all of these disparate ideas. We can pull records out of your GIS. We can help with your paper records and digitizing them. We can bring all of this together so everything is going into this funnel and you get that preliminary inventory. For the folks that think they have replacement issues, you need to do this sooner than later so that you can get in line for money to help you with the program. Everyone needs to have something on paper to apply to help pay for the inventory itself. But for the folks that believe they might have a problem with the goosenecks that are potentially going to need to be replaced now or later, if you think you're going to need any money at all, or you would like money to help with this, you're going to have some kind of preliminary inventory or an engineering report, which is what we provide, so that you can go to the state, you can get in line for the money. And if you don't get it this year, there's money from last year, there's money for this year, and there's 3 more years of money to help pay for this. But you need a plan to go to the state to get SRF funds to do this. And that's what we do. So at this point, with 18 months left, I actually have started telling people that we are selling compliance. So as an example, in the state of Indiana, we are the record keeper for the whole state. So whatever PWS sends in our state, it's going to be a digital record or our IDNR spreadsheet. We are going to compile all of those. So the idea is that we have a lot of experience in bringing together multiple different spreadsheets, multiple different programs, and putting it together and building it. And we think that there should be some leniency on the spreadsheet in turning it in. Hopefully it's going to be a digital record because it's going to be easier for DNR to take. But if not, as everybody's talked about, it can be put on their spreadsheet. It can be submitted that way. And we're going to wait and see on that. So Andy, next slide. And when we're talking about this, and this was covered really well by Howard, and it was covered by Diamond Maps yesterday, but the whole visualization process of this is important. So with our system, even if you don't have a GIS, we're going to act like a GIS, be able to give you heat maps on where you need to look to eliminate your unknowns. So in our system, blue would be safe, red would be bad, and yellow would be unknowns. And this is what would be produced on a preliminary inventory. We would advise you on how to go about eliminating the unknowns, whether it be customer surveys, whether it be popping the lids and checking there if you can, if you didn't stub out. There's multiple processes for getting that customer information, which is going to be the biggest challenge. On your side, we're going to help with as-built. We're going to help work with any records you guys have. We're going to work with engineering firms. We actually partner with them to get their records to bring it in for you. So we are the generalist. If you have records here, you have a partnership over there, whatever you have, we're going to bring together. We're going to put it in a very easy to use software as a service program that anybody can log into and begin doing information entering. You can have this out in the field. As you're out there, you can take the picture and upload it into the software. You can have automated surveys sent out and have that information automatically entered into it. What we're trying to do is do the lift for you or help with the lift that you have. And one thing to keep in the back of your mind is the idea that this is a living document, but there are going to be communications needing to be sent out for the rest of the time. Unless you have a completely clean system and can prove it, who knows what LCRI is going to do. But I mean, if you have unknowns at the end of this, you're going to have to send them notices, and that could be tightened up, but you need a program that's going to help you do that. If you want to do it off your spreadsheet, that's great. But when they're talking about oh, you went out and did customer verifications and you need 10% of that, we can tell you which of that 10% you need to go and how much you've done up to that point. So that's a real high level on how the software works. If you're interested, I can give you a quick overview online. I was going to do it here, but we are running really, really, really late. But I can give you a quick overview on how easy it is to use. So Andy, next slide, please. And getting back to the whole Excel thing. I mean, Austin used a bunch of terms that I don't even know. I'm 57 years old. I mean, I do Excel. I can work with Excel, but a lot of it went over my head. So with the Excel spreadsheet, unless you're going to lock it all the time, there's going to be lack of control and security. Excel is prone to human error. If you have 1,000 lines down and they're 20 plus columns across, you might be off a line as you go to it. I'm not saying it's the worst thing, but there could be human error. Excel is hard to consolidate. If you're cutting and pasting a lot, I would be testing that to make sure it's working so that you can turn it into DNR. The last thing that you want to happen is to get 18 months from now, have a complete spreadsheet that for some reason does not go into their system, and you're going to have to go back and figure out what happened. Excel can't help you make decisions. So if you're looking at it and I have this many unknowns or I have this many galvanized needing replacement or whatever it is, there's no way to aggregate that information and help you make decisions on the fly this month, next 6 months, for the next 18 months on what is the best system to go about continuing to eliminate the unknowns. It's not designed for collaborative work. I mean, if anybody's used Excel, everybody does it a little bit differently. If you have a lot of people in your Excel, it could be screwed up. If you have a database, which is what we would provide, it's not a digital spreadsheet, it's an actual database. So you're going to have information input in there. We're going to pull that out, give you reports as you need it, and then we're going to pull that out and send that to DNR. Getting back to the whole troubleshooting and testing, if you're copying and pasting, you absolutely have to do this, even if it's every couple of months, because the last thing you do is as Austin said, go over the formulas or input a formula that's going to screw things up.
Yep.
And then the whole fraud and corruption, which hasn't been touched on yet, but this is going to have to be public data at some point through whatever process they say that you're going to have to share this. And we can help with that because it's going to be in a database that can't be broken or can't be screwed up.
Yeah. I
So,
think we got a question.
Yes.
oh, sorry, the bells.
Is this service sold as a term contract or as a subscription?
Very good. What we do when I speak to people is I try to understand your situation. Our program is based on the number of your connections and the number of records that you have. So I like to go into detail about that because that determines the length. Whatever the length is, and I never go beyond 2 years because we can't predict what's going to happen in 2 years, you own everything that is produced. If you have a GIS system, we will put it back in there for you. So it is a term contract based on what is produced and who knows where it's going to go from there, but you will own everything at the end. Next slide, please, Andy. Some ways to do this. And this wasn't really talked about a whole lot in it.
No.
Surveys are a great place to start. And there's two attitudes on this. One is to put it out first to everybody saying, DNR, EPA are requiring us to do this. Can you help us? And there was even this suggestion of having town meetings and things like that. That is one way to do communications. The other way to do communications is a little bit more specific and find out your preliminary inventory, find out how many unknowns you have, and then begin targeting those with surveys. I don't know if anybody's seen the lead check swabs, but it comes out with the markers and the picture on there with the kit and the magnet. You can go out to people's homes and do this. You can actually share this with them to do this, but there are ways over the course of the next 18 months to get with customers, convince them to help you, and then find out what method would work best. This doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be complete, but it has to be making a lot of progress. And if you show them different ways to do this and ask for their help, we believe that you can get participation. There are going to be unknowns. There are going to be refusals, but you want as complete as possible to find out what happens in 10, 16, 24 when they decide or actually force you into some kind of compliance program. Next slide, please. We can do surveys for you. You guys can do surveys. I have one system in Indiana that told me they got a 70% response rate. Now, I don't know exactly what that means. They're acknowledging they got it, so I have to dig into it a little bit more, but some folks have had 10 or 15% response rates and have to do this a couple times. Some folks have had great success, but the idea is that any piece of information, whether it's going out to their house and getting it, whether it's a survey, whether it's an old record, whether it's a tap card, whatever it is, that's one piece of information that helps you to keep from digging or backing. And that's the bottom line. If you look at the EPA and what they're saying is they're saying try every method you can in whatever fashion it is before you dig or back anything. There will be some of that, but why not know everything you can know? And predictive modeling was brought up a little bit too. So if we know 123 Main Street and we know 127 Main Street, we can help you understand what 125 Main Street is. They may or may not accept that, but it gives you a better picture of the whole program. So the idea is to do as much work as possible and in a fashion as possible to keep you from having to dig or vac or spend a whole bunch of money doing that. Next slide, please. And again, this is getting back to the actual tests with the kits, with the markers. It's a pretty cool system. They're actually fairly expensive. So we suggest that depending on the number of connections, the number of people that you have, and nobody's hiring 3 more people to go out and do this, that you equip your folks with these kits so that they can do it with the homeowner and they do understand what's going on. Homeowners are great if they know what it is, if they can identify it, if they're the age of the people in this room. I've heard of renters and younger people not knowing a pipe from a pipe.
Yeah.
So, but the more confidence you can build in the process, the more they can talk to their neighbors, the more likely you are to continue to get good information. So next slide, please. And this is what we're trying to avoid. And even the EPA says use this as a last ditch measure. I mean, it's going to have to be done at some point, but going out and exposing lines and feeling you have to come up with funding to do this in the beginning is going to be difficult. But having a preliminary inventory, having a lot of unknowns or suspected lead and needing assistance to continue the inventory and being able to go to SRF for whatever amount of money you need, you're going to need this. So if you think you're going to have to dig or you think you're going to have to back, I would work very hard on putting together a preliminary inventory, sending that to SRF, see what they say about it, get in line for the funding. Because there's going to be a lot of money out there, but it's going to go pretty fast. And it's been discussed. It can be for the inventory. It can be for digging. It can be for backing. It can be for whatever, but you have to have an idea of what you're going to need to be able to go after and get it. So next slide, please. And again, going back to the whole idea of what we do, I speak mostly to inventory because that's the most pressing issue. If there's additional testing, whether it comes from disturbance or sequential testing, there's a whole lot of things that we can do. We actually began as a water testing company 7 years ago. We've been doing this forever and we can help you guys automate it and go with it. This is not getting into the 1st and 5th liters, which will kick in after 10, 16, 24. This is just testing that might help build a better inventory. Next slide, please, Andy. And then just an overview of what we do. So we are a software company, program consulting and full service execution. We are your partner throughout this process to help you get to completion. We come up with a strategy based on your information and your input. We design a process, and this sounds all high level stuff, but we're going to work with you. You're going to have a program coordinator on our end that understands your situation, has worked with other utilities your size, and we design the program to eliminate as many unknowns as possible. We can help with program funding. And in all the states that I work in, none of them have actually said anything more than it's going to be SRF funds. If there's lab services, extra testing, if you guys want to use your labs, you can use our labs. Again, we have partners all across the country. Remediation and field support, if you need help with that, we have partners for that. And the remediation is going to be the big question mark on how it's done. Because if you get into the EPA guidelines and you get down to section A, B, C, D, E, F, and you get to the paragraph on the remediation, it becomes very difficult. Partner network, as I said, we have partners all over. We enjoy working with engineering firms, and I actually get introductions from them because they are the boots on the ground at times, and we are the software behind it to support it. Customer support is a specific program coordinator on our end that you ask your questions to. And then data and reporting, we help you build and expand the data that you have. And we take you through compliance and submit an inventory on your behalf with you to DNR. Next slide, Andy. So again, I'm trying to keep this 30 minutes. I'm talking really quickly, but the whole idea is you need to begin complying with the regulations in some fashion. You need to prioritize your people and your time so that you know what the next 18 months are going to look like and beyond that. And then if you can, to cut costs, don't digger back, have a partner that's going to help you guide you through this so that it's as efficient and time cost effective as possible. Next slide, Andy. And you know, we're in Missouri, we're all over Indiana. I've got a bunch of business in Texas. As I said, we've got 600 customers across the country. We may or may not be the fit, but I'm happy to speak with anyone to give these general guidelines or even more specific answers if I can. But for this purpose, in my 30 minutes almost on the nose, I'm doing a high level overview as the generalists pull everything together. So Andy, are there questions off that?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, I know I asked a big ask to have Dave here, and he is willing to answer some questions, and I'm willing to jump in, and I'm sure Jim's willing to jump in. Yep. But are there questions about someone who is actually in the process with us? They just began in January, but there may be some questions you have for someone who agreed to work with 120 as a partner.
I guess a little bit about where we're at and the size we are. We're a district with 5,900 customers. We cover 1,200 square miles. And when I first looked at this rule, I thought retirement was probably the best option. It's a complicated rule and it's not real clear. Today, you got a lot of information. Howard and Jim and Steve were afraid we wouldn't have enough talking to fill the data, so they brought me in. But I'm not going to keep you very long. We use a 11-digit locator number for our fixed specific ID. That's township, section, range, and then a 4-digit unique number after that. That stays in place because the accounts change and move and meters change and move. I've spent the last, I guess, 3 months digging through old records and trying to figure out what we have. It's a daunting process, and I'd be glad to answer any specific information, but we're right up against noon, and I don't know about you guys, but lunch is demanding.
Well, we went long this morning. There was a lot of questions that DNR fielded. So, but yeah, Steve, I got a question for you. When somebody contacts you and say, they just look at you and say, we want you to do this. What all would you do? You just do the inventory?
Well, I mean, what I would do is you show me what you have. Mm-hmm. You show me the high amount, the low amount, and then we come up with a plan together. So it's not one size fits all. Okay. It's the idea of having a living document as a database that meets your needs that we help you with. So can we do it all? Everything but boots on the ground? Probably. Right. But it all depends on the level of help that you need and then the other services that we can tie in to get you where you need to be.
So getting started, first of all, it's based on the meters or the size?
Our pricing is based on the number of connections. And then the length that it's going to take. Some folks with good records, we might be able to get done in a year. But if you're looking at limited records or having them scattered everywhere, that's when we go for a 2-year agreement. Okay. After that, we evaluate with you whether you continue with us or you have a strong enough working knowledge of the database that you continue to add and take this yourself. We just don't know what's going to happen after 24. That's why we don't go much beyond it.
Right. So you can help somebody get started then a year from now, they can do it themselves, and you'll still have their information and stuff, right? You store information. You said?
We will store it, but you guys will own it. You'll have possession of the database
Yeah.
going forward. And that's where we have to get into specifics on, could it be done in a year? Is it going to be 2 years? Do you have replacements? Could this be a multi-year contract that we then look at after the first term? And you guys can bring us on, we can get you started, you can evaluate us, and you can decide where you go from there.
What would be the basic starting cost?
Depending on, it's going to depend on the size. So if you're under 1,000, we have a price. If you're more than 1,000, we have a different price. It's all based on those connections. I'm happy to speak about that in detail. But again, it depends. Would it be a year? Would it be 2? Are we talking about digitization? Are we talking about sending surveys? There's a lot of moving parts to it. That's why I like to be very specific when I do send out pricing.
They actually put your email address in the chat.
Great, thank you.
And your number.
Yep. And I'm happy. I mean, I'm on the road a little bit more this week, but again, I'll be there all of next week. If you guys want a specific look at the software, I'll have my computer there and you can see how easy it is to use. Again, I'm not pushing this as a fit for everybody, but if you got overwhelmed today and you'd like to talk to a partner that can help bring this together and go into a little bit more detail, I'm more than happy just to talk.
120 Water will be at the conference next week. They'll be in booth 200.
Thank you.
It is as you come through the door on the left, and pretty simple. So booth 200, go by, see Steve, ask him any questions. I'm sure you can sit down somewhere with them and go over their needs right there. So.
And to back this up, I really appreciate being here today. We've enjoyed being a partner with Missouri Rural. So it's something that benefits everybody. And because we work with them and you guys are partnered with them, or the majority of you are going to be, you get discounted on top of that. So it works for everybody, being part of the program, being part of the solution, but then also partnering with rural waters across the country.
Dave, anything else from you? How has it been with so far?
Well, so far we've been pulling data and putting it together and sending it out. And so we're still in that process where we're learning what they can do for us. And then I'm training on giving up a little bit of control to somebody else. So, which is not my usual mode of operation, but you've got to pull it together and you've got to tie it together. And we'll just, like I said, it's a daunting task. And
It's going to be.
Yeah.
Well, any other questions, Andy?
No.
All righty. Well, it is a little afternoon. We want to thank Steve Smith with 120 Water, Dave Waller, our board president. Want to thank everybody for being with us today. Hope you got a little bit out of it. Like I said, Steve will be at the conference, so pick his brain next week. I'll be there. We are going to have a lead and copper session. Tuesday, I believe it is. Trying to think. So we will be talking about this. Steve will be there too. So come and see us. Thank you all for being with us.